Good evening. The time is now 5:36 p.m. on Wednesday, October 19th, 2022, and this public meeting of the D.C. State Board of Education will come to order. The roll will now be called to determine the presence of a quorum. Interim Director Jew, please call the roll.
Representative Bernstad.
Present.
Representative Jones-Burgess. Representative Wages. Representative Wages. Representative Washington.
Present.
Representative Gasoy. Representative Gasoy. Representative Chang.
Present.
Representative Wattenberg.
Present.
Representative O'Leary.
Here.
Representative Parker. Representative Parker. Representative Sutter.
Present.
Representative Thompson.
Mr. Jew, Vice President Thompson, I believe, is on the phone.
Yes, she is. Thank you very much. Representative Reed.
Present.
Representative Patterson.
Present.
Madam President, you do have quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Jew. Members, we have a draft agenda before us, and I'd like to move to postpone one item on the agenda for consideration. I'd like to move to postpone consideration of SR 22-11 on the submission of letter to DC Education Research Collaborative to the November public meeting pending submission of an equity statement. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Is there discussion?
Well, I was going to raise at the time that I was planning to withdraw it in favor of something else, and I was going to speak to it at that time. Would that be okay?
So you'd like to withdraw it for consideration. Would it be okay to speak to the item during new business?
I'd rather speak to it at that moment where it's on the agenda.
So you'd like us to keep it on the agenda?
And then at that point, note that it can't be dealt with because there's not an equity statement, and then I'll speak to it.
I don't understand why we would deal with it on the agenda given that there is not an equity statement, which is required by our bylaws.
You can do it however you want. I'll raise it at new business.
Okay. Further discussion? Okay. Then I'll call for the yeas and nays. The motion is on postponement of consideration of SR 2211 until the November public meeting. All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay.
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 Okay, the nays have it. We'll keep the item on the agenda. We'll discuss it at the time. I'll note for consideration by both the public and the members. Our bylaws require that there be an equity statement submitted with all resolutions for consideration. There is no equity statement for this resolution, which is the reason that I think it pens discussion. We'll discuss it when the resolution comes forward. Seeing no changes to our agenda then, I entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Thank you, Dr. O'Leary. Is there a second?
Second.
The motion being properly moved and seconded, I'll ask for the yeas and nays. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. The motion is approved. The agenda will be proceeding with as written. We now have the minutes for both our October 12th working session and our October 14th fall retreat. Is there a motion to adopt these sets of minutes?
So moved.
Thank you, Dr. Patterson. Is there a second? Sorry. The motion being properly moved and seconded, is there discussion?
Second.
Okay, seeing no discussion, the motion is on adoption of the October 12th working session and October 14th fall retreat minutes. I ask for the yeas and nays. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. The motion is approved. Good evening. My name is Jessica Sutter, Ward 6 representative and president of the State Board of Education. On behalf of the members of the DC State Board of Education, I want to welcome our guests and our viewing public to our second in-person public meeting since the COVID-19 pandemic. It continues to be very exciting to be here on the dais with my colleagues. The State Board will continue to hold its regularly scheduled public meetings on the third Wednesday of every month in the old council chambers at 441 4th Street Northwest, We continue to work with a contractor on how to better host hybrid meetings in the months ahead and to make sure that we've been able to resolve any audiovisual issues. Those of you who were with us last month know that that was a struggle at the time. This meeting is currently being broadcast live via the District Knowledge Network, and a recording will be made available via the State Board's YouTube page at DC SBOE for the public to view later. Before I get to a discussion of the items on this evening's agenda, I did want to take some time to explain my appearance. I had an unfortunate interaction with the neighbor's dog this weekend and was bitten on the face. I'm healing up, and I appreciate the kind outreach from so many of my education colleagues. This evening, we welcome a panel to discuss public safety in the district, particularly how agencies are currently coordinating with each other and the improvements that can be made to ensure efficient communications, prevention of violence, and immediate action towards threats youths face in the city and online. I thank Vice President Thompson and my colleagues for continuing to raise these concerns during our September 7th and October 12th working sessions, and I'm glad that we've been able to convene a panel this evening to discuss the need for direct, immediate action by the district to address public safety issues. The State Board will also hear from public witnesses as well. We look forward to hearing from you all in person as you share testimony on music and bands in schools, accelerated learning, underfunded DC public schools, empowering families, integrating school support specialists, teacher retention and data, and other important education-related issues. I'm grateful to all who were able to be in person with us today, as I know that a hybrid option was not a posture available to the public tonight. The State Board will close our meeting with consideration of 4 ceremonial resolutions, recognizing National Domestic Violence Awareness and Prevention Month, Dyslexia Awareness Month, National Bullying Prevention Month, and National Principals Month. We will also consider 4 state resolutions this evening on amending committees and task force appointments, strengthening teacher retention and workforce data, the Washington Teachers Union contract, and a submission of a letter to the DC Education Research Collaborative. Finally, I want to note for the audience here and at home that the Committee of the Whole, chaired by Phil Mendelson, continues to hold several hearings in the next months related to the State Board's work. On October 25th, there is a hearing focusing on teacher retention and the State Board's data bill. A November 30th hearing will be on attendance and chronic absenteeism, and December 7th will focus on literacy. I encourage the public to learn more about these hearings on the DC Council website. I now will turn to and welcome for the first time to the dais State Superintendent Dr. Christina Grant for any opening statement she has tonight.
Well, thank you, President Sutter. It's fun to say it in person for the first time, and greetings to board members that I'm meeting in person for the first time. It is great to be with you all in person and truly marks a moment for all of us as we navigate this journey of recovery. I'm pleased to share with you an update on some of our shared priorities, namely the work that we're doing regarding community service, the graduation requirements associated with it, an update on our social studies standards, and upcoming council hearings on teacher retention and educator data, and our shared interest in creating safe environments for our students to grow and thrive. Regarding community service, OSSI has presented information on community service requirements at the State Board of Education's last 2 working sessions, where we gathered critical feedback from all of you and the community to help shape our thinking. Our proposal will stagger the 100-hour community service graduation requirement by 25 hours per year to accommodate for the impact of COVID-19 on student service opportunities. We will add flexibilities for students transferring from out of state, so they only will have to accrue 25 hours of service per year when wholly enrolled in DC schools. In addition, we are broadly defining community service to ensure that the full range of community service options will be accepted by all LEAs. Our engagement with the State Board has been really productive, and I would like to especially highlight the important work of our student representatives whose incisive questioning and pushing and really thoughtful feedback pushed us forward on improving our proposal. For example, we will drop the word voluntary from the definition of community service so that court-ordered community service may also count toward the graduation requirement. We will also add a requirement to ensure that the transfer between LEAs, for example, if a student earns 30 hours during their freshman year at McKinley Tech, but then transfers to Richard Wright, that student will come into their sophomore year or years moving forward with those 30 hours intact. I do want to name, again, the work and advocacy of our student representatives. It did shape this proposal, and we look forward to sharing this with you all again next month. While there is consensus that the staggering hours requirement by 25 hours per year is at an appropriate pace, we did still hear a difference of opinions on whether 25 hours for current graduating seniors is too high of a barrier. We're seeking continued feedback on this question beginning now and November 2nd, when we will present a resolution for a vote to codify the staggered hours requirement, flexibilities for transfer students, and the revised definition of community service. Again, I do want to thank the membership of the board, our student representatives, and the community for engaging in this important conversation. It's going to serve the class of 23 well, but future classes moving forward, and so thank you. Really quickly on social studies, or not so quickly, my apologies. We continue to work really closely with our vendor partner, Opportunity Consulting, to press forward on all K-12 standards and those revisions. To date, we have a complete draft of the K-2 standards, which is currently being reviewed by OSSE, as well as a finalized set of anchored standards and course titles and descriptions. For those of you who work on standards, this is significant progress, and it does name that we are still on track to meet our upcoming deadlines. We're currently working to add additional subject matter experts to ensure the continued strong writing of the standards continue. The last time we spoke, I previewed that we would be onboarding someone to work specifically on social studies instruction. I'm pleased to share that we have a new social studies specialist, and she began her work at OSSE on October 11th. She will oversee the continued standards revision work, and more importantly, she will be planning the path forward for implementation and all of the supports aligned to that work. As I've previously outlined, we anticipate having a full set of standards ready for public comment by mid-December 2022. After the turn of the new year, we plan to convene LEA instructional leaders together with subject matter experts from both local and national organizations to begin the hard work of developing an implementation plan. During this convening, we will inventory existing social studies curricular resources. Representative O'Leary left me one today that I'll be taking back with me, so thank you. But we will be looking at all of our resources that are already in alignment with the plan revised standards and then identify the gaps that exist. In addition, we will identify and begin to plan for professional development, all of our training needs that all of our K-12 educators will need in the district, as they are going to be tasked with aligning their instructional practices and materials to these new standards. We are currently finalizing our plan for community engagement, which will include solicitation of comments from the public, as well as engagement directly with the state board, and we will further update you when the plan is complete. I do want to name, again, thank you for all of the work associated in this very large task. As you can see, we're well on our way to updating the social studies standards. I'm really, truly pleased that we've been able to reset the work and we're moving together with a much stronger product. I appreciate the board's flexibility and partnership and pushing on this shared priority, and I continue to look forward to provide you updates on the revised standards. President Sutter referenced this, but I do want to acknowledge it again. On Tuesday, the Council of the District of Columbia will hold a public hearing on teacher and principal turnover and retention in the district, and the Statewide Data Warehouse Amendment Act of 2021. Interim Assistant Superintendent for Teaching and Learning, Elizabeth Ross, will testify on behalf of OSSE, and I understand that President Sutter will testify on behalf of the State Board. As a former teacher and leader, I know how centrally important recruiting and retaining high-quality teachers and principals is to the improvement of student learning. We look forward to providing our perspective on the educator workforce and the state of educator data collection in the district. I also look forward to hearing the board's perspective. In my time as superintendent, I have found that even when we disagree, we learn from each other and we advance the cause of student learning and well-being together. Turning now to student safety, It's an issue close to my heart, and I'd like to provide you with some background on information about OSSI's role in promoting student safety in the district. While OSSI does not play a role in overseeing school facilities or the streets and sidewalks students take to and from school, we do support with an understanding and implementing of practices that keep students healthy and safe while in school. This includes preventing and responding to incidents that implicate student and staff safety, as well as providing training for adults and standard-aligned educational resources for students. Behavioral health is a key component of our Division of Health and Wellness's work, and we partner with the Department of Behavioral Health to support schools in creating safe and inclusive environments for students and staff to work, learn, and grow together. Through this partnership, the district has expanded school-based health mental supports to all DC public and public charter schools to prevent and respond to student health mental crises. We provide actionable practices and resources to help implement behavioral health plans, and we offer student-facing curriculum, staff training, and ongoing technical assistance to support schools in implementing mental health education and prevention programs that focus on suicide prevention, child sexual abuse prevention, and opioid prevention. One new addition to the suite of work to support safe and inclusive learning environments is our Nude Pride grant. OSSI is investing $764,000 of federal stimulus funds over the next 3 years to provide training and professional development opportunities to increase school staff confidence and capacity to support LGBTQ+ students and create inclusive and supportive communities. Too many of our LGBTQ students feel alienated and bullied at school, and I'm really proud of these investments because they're vital to helping ensure that our schools are safe and healthy. Unfortunately, sexual abuse is also far too common a student safety issue. OSSI has provided schools and community-based partners with model policies and resources to address sexual abuse. OSSI also provides schools with training for adults on identifying and responding to warning signs of abuse, which also includes mandated reporter training. Further, OSSI has provided sample standards-aligned curriculum for teaching students about consent, setting and respecting boundaries, and developing and maintaining healthy lifestyles. Local laws require schools to be ready in the event that they must respond to a safety incident within a school. To meet this obligation, OSSI provides schools with annual training and distribution of EpiPens, and we connect schools to training on usage of defibrillators, CPR, and overall fire and emergency response materials and equipment. School discipline also plays an important role in school safety. OSSI provides supports to limit disciplinary incidents on the front end through our school culture and climate supports, and on the back end through our restorative justice grants. In addition, OSSI supports schools in adhering to local disciplinary laws through our discipline data collection and annual discipline report, as well as through technical support. Safety is fundamental to learning. If a student does not feel safe, whether because of an infectious disease, street violence, bullying, or an abusive home environment, their brain will be focused on their self-preservation rather than on the lesson in front of them. We must do all that we can to keep students safe and promote learning and build communal trust. At OSSI, we are always seeking to improve our practices, so I look forward to listening to and learning from your panel discussion this evening. As I conclude, I'd like to share that on Monday, I had the opportunity to join Mayor Bowser to present Jamar Roundtree with the 2023 DC Teacher of the Year Award. Coach Roundtree, as his students call him, and now as we will call him, is in his 8th year of teaching health and physical education to the children in grades pre-K through 8 at Center City Public Charter School's Brightwood campus. His passion, his creativity, and dedication to help create positive school culture where all feel welcomed, seen, and supported. He is usually the first teacher students see in the morning and the last when they end their day. He goes above and beyond to positively impact the lives of children in the building, and I was filled with joy to see the students share in his excitement in winning DC Teacher of the Year. Celebrating great teachers is truly the joy of this job. And I do want to thank Representative O'Leary for joining us at this Ward 4 school. We had music and T-shirts and stickers. It was truly wonderful, and he was truly surprised. He is now Washington, D.C.'s favorite teacher and coach. Finally, I want to remind all parents to please get your students up to date on their shots so that they are protected from infectious diseases and do not miss a single minute of school. As always, I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all. I'm thrilled to do this in person. I love sharing our updates about our mutual scopes of interest. I had named for President Sutter that I am in the seating disruption cohort, and we have a session this evening, and so I will stay with you for some time, but then I will be leaving to join colleagues. Thank you for having me, and good evening.
Thank you so much for being here in the old council chambers with us tonight, Dr. Grant. We appreciate OSSE's continued partnership on so many policy issues of importance to our students in schools, but I will give a special shout out of thanks for the social studies work. I know it has been a labor of love, and I'm pleased that you're still in this with us. I'm going to turn now to our expert panel for this evening. So if we could have our expert panel come up towards the front table to join us, I'll begin explaining what we're about. Our expert panel this evening consists of 6 invited witnesses who will share their thoughts on public safety in the district. Specifically, we hope to learn more about the current state of interagency and community communications and engagement when it comes to responding to violence. We look forward to hearing from each of them about their work, public safety efforts and resources, and the impacts of this work on student physical, mental, and health safety. I'm excited to hear from Dan Davis, Chief Student Advocate, Office of the Student Advocate, Alan James, Section Chief for Violence Reduction, Office of the Attorney General, Dana McDaniel, Deputy Director, Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement, David Street, Executive Director, Penn DMV, and I apologize if I do not get this name right on the first try. You'll please pronounce it for us so that I get it right thereafter. Boye Sofadia, Director, Growing Up. Thank you. And Cody Wynn, Community Activist, Growing Up. Thank you all for coming to the table. Each of you will have 5 minutes to speak, and then we'll move to one round of questions from the State Board. We'll begin with Mr. Davis, and then we'll go from there. Thank you. Please begin when you are ready, Mr. Davis.
Good evening, President Sutter, Vice President Thompson, Dr. Grant, and members of the DC State Board of Education. Thank you for this opportunity to testify. My name is Dan Davis, and I lead the Office of the Student Advocate. Our student safety should always come first. Unfortunately, we know that instances of harassment and violence persist, jeopardizing the safety of our students. In response to the volume of calls we received related to student safety, our office has worked with numerous schools, government agencies, and community-based organizations to ensure that students and their families are safe while traveling to and from school. Since 2017, we have facilitated community-centered conversations addressing concerns regarding student and family safety while traveling to and from school. These conversations led to community-driven approaches to protect our students and their families. Those efforts were incorporated into last year's investments in Safe Passage program offered to schools in the Safe Passage priority areas. As neighborhoods across the district experienced increased incidents of traffic and community violence, our office anticipated a surge in incidents related to safety as students returned to school last year. Due to this concern, we collaborated with the Urban Institute to survey more than 430 students to start the school year about their safety concerns. We were able to learn more about how students felt while traveling to and from school using various forms of transportation. While the survey confirmed some known truths about students' experiences while traveling to and from school, it highlighted several concerning facts. 1, students identifying as females reported nearly twice as many barriers to traveling to school and home as students identifying as male. 2, students who relied on Metrobus to get to and from school were the most likely to report feeling unsafe. As the school year progressed, we did see a spike in concerns related to student safety. Calls for office related to student safety surged in school year 21-22 compared to the previous school year, when students were virtual. Families sought assistance for solutions to incidents of bullying, harassment, as well as peer community violence. Too frequently, those incidents involve social media, adult or non-student participants, and unresolved in-school conflicts. In response to growing concerns, our office restarted our in-person focus group discussions from before COVID restrictions. We expanded these discussions to include middle school students, the families of elementary age children, and English language learners, and students and families. We continue to work with youth leadership organizations like Pathway to Power, NICVA DC, and expanding partnerships with community-based organizations like Collaborative Solutions for Community. In addition to learning more about the experience of students and families traveling to and from school, we use these discussions to learn how they felt about the current Safe Passage programming too. We were able to speak to additional 226 students and 45 family members, representing 21 DCPS and 16 charter school communities. Those responses we collected told us families were shifting their practices and moving away from the usage of public transportation and relying on driving students to school in their personal vehicles. 2, students who were familiar with Safe Passage programming felt safer while traveling to and from school. We are currently finalizing a fuller student safety report highlighting those responses, which should be available mid-December. The Office of Student Advocate remains committed to amplifying the voices of students and their families while pushing for meaningful solutions. As we continue to support our youth, we are actively seeking opportunities to speak with students and families related to their safety and safe passage. We recognize that safety concerns of our students exist within school buildings as well. In response to growing concerns related to in-school harassment and bullying, Office is developing a bullying harassment resource guide in addition to facilitating a panel discussion on Thursday, October 27th for students and their families. Thank you for this time and creating space to testify. If there are any students or families who are seeking supports with their school experiences, please give us a call at 202-741-4692. We're available anytime between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. Monday through Friday. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Davis. Can we go next to Mr. James? Yeah. Mr. James, can I ask you just to pull the mic closer to you so we can amplify it for the cable TV?
Hello, can I be heard now? Is this clearer? Thank you. I've been in Washington now for 3 years, working with the Office of the Attorney General, and my primary job is to help to implement, set up, and oversee 10 Cure the Streets programs. That's the name of the program that has been funded and supported for the past 4 years by the Attorney General. And there's some members of this panel who are experienced with that, have worked in that program. That program is a here and now, short-term response to high violence in specific places. It is both place-based and person-based. And out of that, we've learned a great deal about who really is involved in violence, who's at the highest risk. And we know, not only from Washington, but we know from experience in cities all across the country, what the effects of the kind of trauma and ongoing stress are on young people and on families and on communities at large. And my primary concern really is looking at longer term and more deeply effective responses to violence. This violence that we're seeing at the levels in urban centers is something that is a product of the past 30 years, has escalated over the past 30 years. The coexisting events that have taken place over that last 30 years has been the destruction of communities and the shattering of families, who no longer really have the ability for the past 2 generations in black communities to really pass down a lot of those morals and ethics that we expect that young people will use when they enter into school and when they're interacting in social environments in general. So very often we'll find that families, and this is not about single parent families, this is about whether or not that single parent or whether that intact family has the ability to point out a direction for their children, whether they have a vision for the future for their children, and whether they're capable of helping their children to develop a vision for their own future and their own self-worth. So I've heard in many of these meetings that I've been attending since I've been here, I've heard people talk about nihilism, that young people have no real vision for their own personal future, but they also have lost a great deal of their value for human life. Most of them, if you talk to them at some length, you'll find that they really don't expect to live much longer. They don't see themselves living to the age of 25 in many cases. And so the value of human life has been lost. And so there has also been a move, a social move toward this posture of aggression and confrontation. And so a lot of the steps that it used to take between a disagreement or a conflict to a confrontation and to ultimately violence have been removed. So we see things escalate very, very quickly. And in a place like D.C., where, and all throughout the South, where so many people are armed, a lot of that conflict and aggression will express itself in gun violence. And that's our mission here with the Attorney General's office. We are addressing gun violence of all kinds, both that kind that seems to develop spontaneously out of interpersonal conflict, and the groups and gangs and crews. We don't have many gangs here that I've been able to identify, but we do have crews that have organized themselves mostly around commercial endeavors, most of which are illegal. But one of the other things that's going on along with these erosions of family life and community life that I'm mentioning are also the unwillingness of children to attend school. And I think that my time is up. So I've seen a report recently that said truancy in DC schools sometimes approaches over 30%. And the reason for that, as far as I can tell from talking to young people, is there are two reasons that they cite most often. That school's not safe, nor is the passage to get there and home, and around the metro stations, etc. And also, there's nothing going on there that they're interested in. And so they just opt not to attend.
Thank you, Mr. James. We'll go now to Dana McDaniel.
Youth, especially in our school systems. And now being with ones for the past 3, going on 4 years, having the opportunity to work specifically with sectors of violence and some of the strategies that need to be put in place to help us see the violence that we're seeing in communities. Public safety is very important to the Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement, known as ONES, where we take a community-based approach to addressing violence, recognizing that violence cannot be addressed with just police work alone. We have several programs that give us an opportunity to connect on a community level and address violence. One of them, which is directly connected to the school-based system, is our ONES Leadership Academy, acronym OLA, that we affectionately call OLA. We are currently located in 3 high schools, in Ward 7, H.D. Woodson, in Ward 8, Anacostia High School, and in Ward 4, Paul Charter School. We have just transitioned to expand into 3 middle schools, Kramer Middle School, Kelly Miller that my grandfather attended, Kelly Miller, and we have expanded to Paul's Middle School, still inside of the same building as the high school over in Ward 4. Our Family Survivor Support Program, we make a lot of community touches with victims of violence, and that too gives us an opportunity to work with children who have been impacted by violent incidents, either shootings or parents or relatives being impacted. We have an opportunity to connect with our Pathways program, where we have young men ages 18 to 24, 18 to 30, attend our 9-week life skills and workforce-based curriculum, very school-based structure with life skills and workforce development, and they go on to have an opportunity for a 6-month subsidy. We just recently launched a People of Promise initiative, where we're offering very specialized shortcut services to some of the most at-risk individuals in the city. And our most relevant program to today's discussion is our Violence Prevention and Intervention Program, where we have about 4 contractors on the ground providing violence interrupters and other prescriptive violence intervention services to 6 wards in the district, 1, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. With that violence prevention work, our focus is people, places, and peace. We try to identify the most at-risk people, either those at risk on either side of violence, to engage them, to connect them to the services they need to help them build plans that keep them safe and keep them successful. Places, we try to work with the most at-risk places, communities that are in crises, as well as learning and leaning upon those communities that are thriving. Not just addressing violence, but also addressing community empowerment. Our goal here at WANS is to be an agency where community is leading everything. We're a simple support and a resource. Community has to come up with their solutions. They're the experts of where they live. Our role is to connect them to what they haven't been able to reach and support them, especially financially, with meeting some of their needs. And then lastly, there's peace. And that's when we really try to focus on some of the generational wars that you heard mentioned today that have been plaguing our city for over 30 years. My people are sick and my people are hurt, and we've been hurting since the riots and the transition into the crack epidemic, and now here we are, and it's playing itself out with boys killing boys with guns. So we have to address things like the music that they listen to and participate in that perpetuate their death, and is very, very profitable. We have to address social media and some of the communications that happen there, some of the social platforms like YouTube, who can actively play videos with guns in hands, but will flag a video that may speak opposingly to some politics. So we're trying to bring a voice to the voiceless, try to help those who are in most pain and in most crises, and again, lean on the experts, and that is not ones. We find those community-based experts, and we get behind them. Thank you again for the opportunity, and I'd like to thank you to my interim director, Delano Hunter, our chief of staff, Marcus Ellis, for their support as well today.
Thank you so much, Ms. McDaniel. I'm going to come now to Mr. Street.
Thanks, Madam President, Madam Vice President, board members. Good afternoon, good evening. I appreciate the opportunity to meet with you all to discuss the importance of social media in the lives of students in Washington, D.C. I'm David Street. I'm a native Washingtonian and the proud executive director of Promote, Enrich, Nurture DMV, Penn DMV, a nonprofit that teaches digital leadership skills, social media training to help build confidence, promote leadership, and discuss conflict resolution as it relates to social media platforms. Currently, we're in 3 Title I schools here in D.C., focusing on 11th and 12th grade students. We intentionally provide the best practices and privacy strategies with a view towards enhancing the online experience as it relates to social media. Research from a 2020 Pew report shows that students ages 14 through 18 spend between 18 to 14 unsupervised hours on social media platforms per day. These platforms include Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Snapchat, and others. Students gather there to engage with their friends and others locally, regionally, and internationally. So in addition to the shared research, through our own surveys and engagement, we know that social media oftentimes becomes a place where cyberbullying translates into physical assaults. These assaults, as they escalate, occur on school grounds, which leads to suspension, resulting in students missing valuable teaching and learning experiences. You're aware that this is not just happening in Washington, D.C., but it's happening all over the country. What we also know is that the excessive time spent on negative social media experiences contribute to mental health concerns that affect the ability of our students to learn, grow, and succeed in the educational environment. All this does have an impact on students' self-confidence, which is another conversation in itself. So the school board appears poised to take a stand on this important issue and other issues of the day and respond with the investment, training, and resources that promote digital leadership, conflict management, and other safety strategies needed to truly navigate social media. Some of the solutions that we want to offer up is, one, continuing to create spaces where parents, teachers, and concerned citizens can just have conversations to brainstorm, share ideas. Also, to empower our students. Some of our students have massive followings on social media. We ought to be creating programs to allow them to become influencers, creating campaigns of their own, to reach their own peers, to talk about the importance of being a positive influence and role model on their social media platforms. So I stand by ready to support the efforts of the school board and to assist in creating those spaces. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Street. Mr. Sofadaya?
The mics are on. They're picking up through cable television, President Sutter. They're not amplifying as well in this room, but they pick up through cable television.
At the time, okay, thanks. It's definitely an honor to testify in front of, this panel today, because this topic right here definitely means a lot to me and my organization, which is growing up. Boye told you a little bit about our organization, but I'm going to tell you a lot that we do on the ground. Every day I wake up, it's about keeping these kids safe. And why this means a lot to me, I've seen multiple homicides that happen from these kids coming and going from school. Definitely what my organization goes into these schools and do mediations and conflict resolutions and things like that, something that they need. But I'm here begging is that we definitely put pressure on these government officials. These students don't got no programming, proactive, meaning getting into their lives before they become a tier 1 individual and a high-risk individual. The only time they get seen is when you need to get into the system. We don't really have too many programs that work with them before they get to that point, no return. So I'm definitely here pleading with this board and this panel to let's do something about it. The Safe Passes program we got that started 11 months ago to put the individuals in the routes coming and going from the kids from school, but they are not violence interrupters. They're only eyes and ears. They are not trained to stop conflict resolution. They are not trained to prevent violence or anything like that. We have no violent interrupters on that Safe Passage team that can stop conflict resolutions and things like that. The program do help because 11 months since this program was started, from fires growing up, we done put in at least over 100 incident reports that happen coming and going from school. But the issues going into the schools and talking to these kids and building relationship with these kids, a lot of them suffer from trauma. A lot of them suffer from pain. A lot of them seen their parents murdered. A lot of them parents is incarcerated. So you try to bring the mental health agencies in there to deal with them and also feeling a bond with them like that. Even though we work with these kids while we're in school, they call us for issues outside of school. Food. We work with Dunbar, McKinley, KIP to, it was a program we partnered with DTLR where it was called Pack Your Fridge, where we took 10 kids and just let them shop and get all the food they want. We also did a partnership with them called Prom Love, where we took 3 kids from each high school and did their whole prom, from the clothes to the car and everything like that. And that's some of the things that we do, me and Boye, with our organization. We got a staff of 12 individuals with growing up. I'm also the site supervisor for Not Cure the Streets. So a lot of these kids that's in these schools are in our database for being high-risk individuals. A lot of them come to us for our solutions and things like that. It's just about us keeping these kids safe and do what we need to do to keep them safe, meaning after they get out of school, they really got nothing to do. The boys' clubs are closed. The recreations close early and things like that. It's about getting these kids something to do, about a lot of more in-school, out-of-school programs. That's some of the things that these schools need, after-school programs, in-school programs, and just things like that. I feel though it should be a safe passage site in every route in the DC public schools and DC charter schools, the subway stations, the paths of where they come and go from school. I mean, this issue is important because, like, you know, we see it a lot. We see the kids come get dropped off from school, but they don't go in school. They navigate down the street or somewhere else, and an incident happens. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nguyen. Thank you to all of you for the testimony you shared. We're going to move now into a round of member questions. I did want to communicate Vice President Thompson is joining us remotely via phone. She is not sure that her audio is going to work well enough to answer questions, but she wanted to thank you all for being here, and she's really been pushing us to have this conversation as a board, so I want to thank her publicly for that. I'm certain that she'll follow up with many of you afterwards after she's had the chance to watch the recording. I'm going to turn to Mr. Ju to call the member round of questions. It sounds like he is going to ask a couple questions on behalf of Vice President Thompson. And you want to do that first, and then we'll move on to students and then to other members. Thank you, Mr. Ju.
All right, so there are 2 questions from Vice President Thompson. I'm going to go ahead and read those into the record. So the first question is, can any of the panelists speak to collaborative or coordination? I think that's the representative, oh, sorry. I think that, I literally am reading it directly, I'm sorry. Can any of the panelists speak to collaborative or coordination? I think that's the rep from CURE speaking about violence interrupters not being part of safe passage. Are there any capacities where they can call on one another or work together? And then I'm happy to ask her second question too. The second question is about proactive programming and approaches and what you all would recommend.
You want to go ahead?
We'll start here and then we'll come over there.
Okay. Far as violence interrupters work and collaborate with the schools, we do. The schools that's in our target areas, we try to tend to definitely do safe passages up there, but what we did also, we got the community involved. A lot of my violence interrupters are placed in high target areas in their community, so we reached out to the community to go up there and definitely do the safe passage work along with the workers that's up there. And to that, it's just that what we need is basically, we definitely need trained individuals that also can definitely stop conflict resolution in violent situation and just be aware of the situation that's at hand. Just to give an example, you know, me and my staff, which is the growing-up staff and other violence interrupters, we just stopped the situation at a school. We found out information where students was the target of another gang rival that came with guns, and we came right there and we de-escalated that situation. And we also let the school know about everything what happened. They took they took their precaution and did what they had to do to keep them kids safe.
Thank you. Ms. McDaniel, did you also, oh, I'm sorry, Boye, did you want to?
I was going to chime in that one of the things that we've seen that's happened with collaborating definitely with the office and all the other government agencies, is that growing up has been able to go to them, especially with the one's office and everything that they've been able to do, is go to them and say, hey, look, we want to put together this event, or we want to do this program. And what they've done is work with us to put the program together, fund us, and make sure that we're able to do the program all the way out. So I just want to talk about that and cross collaboration and sharing information.
I just wanted to chime in on the second question, I believe it was, about proactive strategies. Again, as it relates to social media, one of the most proactive things that I've seen is when you become innovative and really empower students to use their voices on their social media platforms. Brands, businesses do this all the time, and so as it relates to cyberbullying, we really need campaigns that are youth-led, youth-driven, and have their voice. And so how do we fund that? How do we resource that? How do we promote that amongst the students in our school system? I think that's something that we need to discuss and figure out.
I'd like to just maybe 3 questions. As far as being proactive is concerned, I think that when I think of being proactive, I'm not thinking of what we can do in the near term. I'm thinking about what we're addressing. Generations, social power. What can we do on generations that will not be following the same trajectory as the older citizens, perhaps their parents? So that calls for policy, not programs. Programs have impact in the near term, and they can calm things down. I'll go there on the agenda. That we do can have a new impact in terms of calming down community and hotspot so that other things can happen. It takes policy to put those other things in place. It takes investment to put those other things in place. While we're talking, I'm sure that there's somebody somewhere who's trying to figure out how to trim these school budget. So we should be investing more in schools, and we should be investing in families that send their children to those schools, because that is what's going to change the social attitudes and change the kinds of behavior that we see, which are follow-ons to previous generations. The third generation of this level of violence in the school, because all the schools have a direction.
There are some system barriers before, if I may. There's some system barriers that are in place that are preventing some of our community partners from being in school business the way they want to be. As I hear some of our partners here at the table talk about the work they do in the community, I'm thinking of the opportunities and the barriers that come up as far as going through the clearance process and getting physically into the school building. We've created some systems and policies and practices that just make those wait a very long time to get into the building to offer help. And that's for community members that come from a wide range of backgrounds, be it from returning citizens to community members, parents that have more colorful experiences in their life.
Thank you very much. And just a reminder to the representatives on the dais, we are going to start, I think as President Sutter said, with our student representatives, and then we'll move through the elected members in the order of their arrival. So I'm going to first start with Representative Bernstad.
Yes, thank you. Thank you all so much for your time. I have a few questions. First, for Mr. Davis, I know you mentioned that students identified as females reported feeling twice as dangerous. Are there currently any gender or identity-based initiatives around safe passage?
There are, I can't recall any gender-based programs that are targeted for safe passage. There are WMATA and I believe Metro and OHR have some street harassment programs and policies that are available, but they're not necessarily targeted to students, nor were they built out to support students.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Mr. Nguyen, I know you mentioned, I have 2 questions. I'm going to ask them at the same time in case that makes it easier to answer. You mentioned that safe passage staff are not violence interrupters. Could you just talk a little bit about where that disconnect comes from? Like, I know you mentioned what the differences are, but why is it hard to connect the two and get them within the same program? And then also, how do you envision safe passage workers building these relationships with schools when they're not necessarily inside schools, but we know that building relationships with students is super important in kind of violence interruption?
The first part of your question is the violence interruption program what I could say far as with Curtis Streets is definitely a contract issue. Is why violence interrupters can be on the Safe Passage team at the same time, because the schedule loop in at the same time. We're both sites they need to be at the same time, so it's definitely an issue far as the time. And the second part of your question is that the Safe Passage workers, I know they out there in the eyes and ears, but they build a relationship with the schools and the staff and the students along the routes, doing school, doing the routes and things like that. The Safe Passage team definitely held events, meaning that, you know, in some schools we passed out readers to the students, pizza, and also help with homecomings and pep rallies to get to know the staff and the students. So the students definitely know the Safe Passage workers that's in their routes and their travels coming and going from school.
Okay, thank you so much. And then my last question, Mr. Sofadia, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. You mentioned that you guys run a lot of Safe Passage programs at schools. Do schools have to specifically request these programs? Do you seek them out? What is kind of the protocol for getting these programs into these schools?
I think when the program was originally started, they targeted certain schools and certain problem areas that they wanted the Safe Passage routes to be at. We talk to schools all the time that don't have Safe Passage, and I tell them to harass you all and our government officials for Safe Passage, because at the end of the day, if the community doesn't ask for it, then we're not wanted. So if you want us, definitely that's the best way to do it. A lot of schools don't have it. I mean, even though we have 17 schools under us, there's a lot of gaps there between Southeast and Northeast that we wish we were there. So yes, we really need community members to reach out and ask for Safe Passage in their community.
Is there any reason why community members may not feel comfortable reaching out and asking for it? I know some members do and then their needs aren't met, but is there any reason, or is there any way to make it easier for community members to do this outreach?
I think it's yes, it is easy to do it, but the problem is a lot of people don't know where to go. So they may go to one of our Safe Passage workers and ask them, and then they may point them to our supervisor, and the supervisor will get them to us. We also, not only do we have 65 Safe Passage workers, we have maybe about 30 community members who are just volunteers for growing up on the Safe Passage program. Prior to it actually being a major budget for it 11 months ago, when I was with Cure the Streets, we did Safe Passage with our Cure the Streets violence interrupters, and we also that stepped up and helped us. So if they ask or if they need to reach out, maybe we just all need to probably do a better job of making people aware of how to reach out. I think that's important. I think it's making sure that everybody's transparent of who to go to, and I think that will really help bringing more awareness and getting more support behind the program.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, we will move on to Representative Jones-Burgess. And I will remind both members and the panelists that there is a timer. It is set for 4 minutes, and that is inclusive of the time to ask the question as well as to respond. Again, the green light is indicative of time remaining. When it does go to a red light, the time has expired. Representative Jones-Burgess.
I had a question for Promote, Enrich, Nurture DMV. And it was like understanding that youth are traumatically affected by social media because it affects our education and experiences. How can you help youth navigate the media when that's all we know?
Yeah, I think we'll talk about barriers. Barriers been a theme that we've thrown out there quite a bit throughout this conversation. I think the barrier between the youth and some of these organizations, the older generations, that they don't necessarily speak the language of social media. And so it's just having a basic understanding of what social media is and how it works on both sides. And so what we do through our Youth on Digital Leadership program is not only work with our young people, but we also have a component that works with parents and older community members to kind of get them involved, to understand what these platforms are, how to utilize, what's the difference between Twitter and Instagram, and all those different types of things. And then we move into some more privacy strategies and whatnot. The thing that I'm really excited about our program, our digital leadership program, is it does a couple of things. One, it talks about the digital divide. It talks about why certain things are the way they are, when it comes to technology, resources, and all those different types of things. And then it gives various simulations. So if you are on Instagram and someone sends you a picture or a message or, something along those lines, who do you reach out to? What's the appropriate way to do it? Having students understand about their First Amendment rights and what that really means. You just can't say anything on there and just say, well, I'm protected. No, there's certain laws you have to respect. And so we really try to do a comprehensive, holistic look from the digital social media aspect, not just with the students, but also the community. And again, empowering and working with our students, working with them to ensure that they have a voice and what we're building and using their voice to talk to their peers online. Hopefully that answers the question.
Representative Jones-Burgess, did you have any other questions? Okay. We'll move to Representative Washington.
Hi. Ooh, okay. My question was mainly for Ms. McDaniel, but anyone can answer it. And I don't know if you guys mentioned this earlier, but you've been discussing a bit about these generational wars. What do you think is the cause of that, or the main causes of that? And then what do you feel as though reinforces them?
So our generation was really sprung up most prominently during the crack cocaine epidemic. The crack cocaine epidemic, similar to the riots in the 60s, were two damaging events in the chronology of black trauma. And crack cocaine really shifted the identities of the community and the household. Younger boys became representatives of power because they had access to resources and were oftentimes providing and selling behind the perpetuation of some of what we dealt with. Mothers went through abandonment syndromes, where crack cocaine led a lot of mothers to be very neglectful and leave their children. We had a lot of fathers who were victimized by violence or arrested. And then you have what I like to call the exhausted grandmother syndrome. Crack cocaine led to a lot of grandmothers who had to raise children, and led to a level of exhaustion where many of them have depleted their energy a lot sooner than they should have. And many of them, as we've done our work over the years, we've lost a lot of those hard-working grandmothers due to that exhaustion. So crack cocaine was one of those primary things that led to those wars, and those wars used to be about territory, money, and now wars have shifted to being more music-related. Murder music is our new injury in the chronology of black trauma, and it is the weapon that is being used, that our young boys are using to destroy us and destroy ourselves. And so we really have to take hold of that and understand what that means, what that even means to our country. The fact that we can sell music about black boys dying. We could sell music about black boys dying. I could never sell songs about rape or child molestation. And if I replace the N-word with other words of slur from other racial or other social groups, that those imageries would not be allowed. So we really have to address this at a super high level, and in terms of what's perpetuating it and how much it is being financed. A lot of money has been made on Black death for quite a long time in our country. And we have to address that, and we have to make sure we protect black life. And if we begin to implement that as a country, I believe it has to come to us as a people, and we try to protect black life and get away. What we do at ones is gun violence. We actually like to call it gun virus because we are sick, and there are symptoms to gun virus. There are certain people who are more likely to be affected by gun virus than others. So we have to look at violence as the virus that it is. We also have to call the conflicts we see in our communities what they are. They are wars. And if we call them wars, then maybe we'll get the state of emergency later than we need and continue to get the resources we need. But if we soften the language with conflict, if you look in the dictionary, conflict is a heated discussion. But if you look in the dictionary, a war is an armed conflict. What we're dealing with is war. AK-47s, and bulletproof vests, and drive-bys, and masks. This is war. And we watch this happen in other countries, and we're willing to step in and assist them with negotiating. We have to have that same skill set inside of our violence interrupters to be able to negotiate war, because we're asking Cody to do that in a hoodie. And he needs more than that to be able to negotiate 30-year-old wars that a lot of children, even including my own, were born into, inherited. So it's layers, and we have to uncover those layers and be honest with some of the truths that we have to own as a people.
Thank you very much.
All right, we are going to move to our elected representatives now. Let's see. Representative O'Leary.
Ms. McDaniel, I'd like to thank you for that. You mentioned an emergency. And that's the problem, is that this is an emergency that needs all hands on deck, and the government is unwilling to declare an emergency. And I think that that's something that all of us in this room understand. I have a question. I don't want to get started on this because I'll use up all my time. Do y'all talk to each other, your different organizations? Because it seems to me that's a rhetorical question, I guess. Because what we need is this passion that you have for this enormous problem, which has to do with a lot of things, but one of them is guns. And in order for us to solve this problem, it has to be a community effort where everyone's working on the same page and talking to each other, because we know in the government, a lot of the times, different organizations don't even communicate with each other. So has there been I know that they have these forums and meetings and everything like that, and everybody talks about the problems, but they're not solved, because if they were solved, then we wouldn't be here. And what can we do about that?
If I may?
Anybody.
Just in terms of talking, in FY22, we did do monthly conference calls with our partners at CURE. We also talk consistently with the Safe Passage Committee. On the ground, our ground staff speak on a daily basis in order to coordinate efforts. I think one of the things to be done about it is to drive tangible, practical action plans. You have to have do. No more theory, no more philosophy, broad, vague strategy. It has to be very specific dues, and those dues have to be specific to the people and places in pain. For example, in our wars, many of our communities, and Cody and they will attest to that, have attack points. There's a specific place where you're attacked in this community. This is where our enemies come, through this alley or by this tree, and we can take some steps and strategies to address the attack points in those communities. If this is the alley where they come from to do killing, then this is the alley we need to address, be it a speed bump, a gate, a light, or something. So we need very tangible dues that help us take action, and it has to be a shared plan governed by maybe a unified body that keeps us coordinated, and keeps us accountable, has to have timelines and action steps and checkpoints. We have to be able to check in monthly, bi-monthly, quarterly to see what was done, and if things were not done, what is our accountability practice? How much of an emergency is it if we've asked for a thing that has gone undone for however long a period of time? So action steps, accountability, things we can do, and checkpoints where we're keeping ourselves accountable, I think will help.
I have one other question about Safe Passage. Some of the schools in Ward 4 don't have Safe Passage. I want everyone who's watching or listening to know that what you said about getting in touch with the organization to get the people at Safe Passage to come to their schools, because I know how incredibly effective it is for the going in and coming out of the schools. But every school should have Safe Passage.
I'm a supporter of Safe Passage, and I believe it's an important initiative. But it's speaking to what Dana explained, is that if this was another time before the disintegration of our communities and before the shattering of our communities and our families, families and school districts would come together to solve that problem about safety on the way to and from school. There would also be people present in those parent association meetings. I don't know what's going on in DC parent association meetings, but in the districts that I've worked in, they're sparsely attended. And so we need to figure out a way to repair some of the damage that has been done. And I'm speaking long-term. For now, I think that we should be trying to strengthen, we should be incentivizing participation in the schools by parents and families, and we should be helping them to understand what the problems are and challenging them to figure out how they can contribute to solutions as well. These are community social issues, and shattered communities don't do well at it. We have to help them to repair themselves.
Thanks.
All right. I did miss Representative Patterson. So Representative Patterson, you're actually before Dr. O'Leary, but.
That's quite okay, Alex. Thank you. What I want to say first is, Ms. McDaniels, I truly appreciate what you just said. You answered my question before I could truly answer it. So it does give me, I'm going to come back to it, but it does give me the opportunity to go to a story that I talked about in our working session that involves growing up and why they're here, to emphasize a point on what you said. What I talked about in our working meeting was that, as most people know, I'm an administrator for KIPP DC. Okay, that's my day job. And I met Cody and growing up a year ago when we lost a student on the third day of school. The third day of school, stabbed in front of the school on Brentwood on the sidewalk. Dead. Child gone. Another child gone. Prison. Incarceration. Cody's name and Bouye were the names that were brought to me when I said, who do I go to try to decrease this? We came together. They worked with us over the last year. What we did at KIPP was to bring them into the school, as you talked about, Dan, about bringing people into the schools to build those relationships with administrators. If there still are SROs, to build those relationships with SROs and other people so that you can get in front of them. Fast forward 1 year, as Mr. Wynn just talked about, he literally had to come to us and said, there are some other children who are being targeted. I just saw gentlemen sitting in their car. I can tell you the car, I can tell you the color, everything. And they have guns on them right now, and they're hunting these children. They are hunting them. And they said they're not going to stop until they get them. At that moment, we called, just what you said, Ms. McDaniel, a group. We set action plans. We held people accountable. We had everybody at the table because we could do that as a network to pull those people in. We also identified and talked to the council member and their constituent service person to bring in any other resources, that ward's commander to do any policing, to bring extra support at arrival and dismissal. That's what one, and I'm not saying that to blow R up, but the coordination that you spoke of. And what I want to ask, and any one of you guys can answer this question, why isn't it that we don't do what you said, Ms. McDaniels, is have like hotspots that we meet with, and there's coordination across the full sector, and also allows access to school leaders to inform them of what's happening, which students are being targeted. They could be from multiple schools. As I said, this happened at KIPP, but we also know that McKinley Tech is right there, and Dunbar, and they all feed into the same metro system. So could you guys tell me, someone tell me, as you said, Ms. McDaniels, why don't we have that type of coordination where we come together on a regular basis, where it's across different silos and functions to do that work to save a life? Because literally, we went from a kid laying on the street 1 year to keeping 3 kids from being on that same path and laying on the street. Same exact street. So if you guys can answer that for me.
So our Chief of Staff, Marcus Ellis, is about to create a weekly meeting with these joint partners to try to do just what you're speaking of. We're going to try it on a small scale because it's so many partners. We want to kind of gain, implement, perfect our strategy before we expand. But there's several partners we're going to do this every Monday. This is a chance to do the week before, set some plans for the week coming, and do what you described. So we're kind of trying to pilot that on a small level. All of the partners here are invited to those meetings. Cure will be invited. We have a list of the Safe Passage partners, providers and intervention partners in communities. I think we're only starting with about a group of 12, one representative from each, and each one is able to come together and begin to formally strategize and write out plans and timelines. And because we're going to come back weekly, that gives us the accountability and checks and balances measure. If it's successful, we're really hoping to expand that.
And I know I'm over my time, but I want to emphasize the access to school leaders where that information can be shared, because I know there may be coordination in certain government agencies, exterior-wise, but that information was only relevant to us and allowed us to set up the plans that we could because we had access to school leaders. So, and I know I'm over my time, and I don't, Madam President, but just that aspect itself, how do we get that to happen so that the needed groups have access to school leaders so that they can protect their babies?
Great, thank you so much. Representative Reed.
Good evening, everyone. Ms. McDaniels, the first time I met you was on the corner of 16th and you in a neighbor's backyard, talking about, some of the situations that were going on in that 16th and U corridor. And I always appreciate your sentiments about community and the reminders related to just strategies, how we empower one another. Mr. Wynn, similar, your name has come up a lot, and it's just good to put an eye or face to name. I probably encountered you before, but didn't know that you were Cody or Mr. Wynn. So 2 questions. My first question is, where are we with the Safe Passage rollout? I know the buses are in place. I know that I see individuals standing in certain corridors, but curious about some of the training that's supposed to happen. And I also have to give a shout out, Johnson Middle School is one of the schools that was added to Safe Passage through talking to a violence interrupter, Ms. Maria Johnson, and also your staff, Dan, who came to our Johnson's parent-teacher organization. That's the first question. The second question is about some of that personnel stuff. So I know we love our babies, but I'm also worried about what supports are in place, Mr. Wynn, when you are intercepting guns. Is there insurance available for your families? Are there additional protections? Because that's a real element to when you're engaging with violence. So those are my 2 questions.
To the second part of your question, yes, there's insurance in place for my staff and also myself with Growing Up and also with Kirk Streets. To the first part of your question,
and you can add if there anything that you need, any additional supports.
Yes, we definitely need basically support. Like one of the panelists has said, how hard it is for individuals, definitely returned citizens and people like that to get access into the schools, far as the fingerprint system that's in place. Right now, and I at least got 60 workers that haven't been on the ground with Safe Passage yet because they waiting for a DC HR or DCPS clearance right now. And that's definitely hindering us, and they've been waiting almost 2 months now. For the clearance right now. So the second part of your question, I'm gonna let Mr. Boyes over there answer that because he know all the sectors of the Safe Passage.
Can you do me a favor, because he answered the second one, I was ready. Can you just give me repeat that first part of it?
Yes, where are we with Safe Passage rollout? I know the buses are now available. I know that there are individuals in green vests standing near certain schools, but has a training element come into place? And I'm not sure what the rest of the roll-up was, but are there elements that we have waiting for implementation?
So we did, the great thing is this summer, they were able to put together the first Safe Passage training. Usually we were doing it, but we were able to do something where everybody came together, and they did 2 great trainings for the staff to start up the new school year. As far as rollout, Cody mentioned some things that have been a big issue for us, DCHR, clearance, DCPS, and we were even talking about the communication between all the different agencies. I get it, it's a new program, but it's some of the things like sitting down and having that first meeting with everybody, all the involved parties, that's been an issue because it's a new program, we do get that, but we also know that kids' safety is important. So if we don't have conversations initially, that's when we have breakdowns. And like Mr. Patterson said before he left, the good thing that we've been able to do with the schools that we have is that we do have those meetings with the administration, the community. We try to get us all in one room as much as we can, and we try to have those conversations, but it doesn't happen. I'm sorry, I'm over, but I just wanted to say this last part. It doesn't happen as much as it really needs to happen. As far as rollout, yes, you see the green vest, but right now we're waiting for the contract. So our fear right now is if we don't get a new contract in place, what's going to happen with our workers? we're waiting on it. And I mean, we are teamed up with organizations such as NARC, Yay Me. There's a lot of good organizations that's doing it, but we are waiting. And it's a fear of ours that we're going to have a gap in safety. And if we have a gap in safety, if something happens, we'll be back here having a conversation about how did that happen. I'm telling you right now, it happened because there's a gap. Even payments out to the smaller organizations such as ourselves, that's an issue, right? Because we can't hang with the big boys in certain ways, so we are using money out of our own payroll, out of our own pockets, making sure everybody gets paid, waiting on our reimbursement, those things. So just helping us build capacity and stuff like that, even for the rollout, has been an issue. I mean, we're dealing with it, but of course, we'd like to bring some awareness to it that it is going on.
Thank you very much. Representative Chang.
Thank you, and I want to pull from Mr. Allen's distinction between programs that address the short term and then policies that address longer term structural issues to focus in on the short term programming and ask folks from this side to this side, if I may, if you had a magic wand, what programming would you fund first or facilitate first, given where we are? Understanding that's a Band-Aid.
Well, you have to understand I've been working on violence now. 30-year career. The last 12 years has been gun violence in various cities. And I don't believe, and we can do great programs, but if we don't build on them, we will be doing it forever. So I haven't seen much of a change in the 10 years I've been doing this. I've seen really great programs. I am committed to the program that I am working in with OAG. I'm committed to all of the efforts that are being undertaken by everybody else. But I will sit back while people talk about what the best program is. The best program probably would be RJ in the lower grades, start in the lower grades, teaching children how to problem solve.
Yeah.
You know?
So moving upstream.
Yeah, because generations are shorter now than they used to be. We're starting to see these adults at the age of 17.
Yeah.
Won't be long.
Yeah.
Thank you for the question. I think if we want to address programs that will impact on violence, we have to do programs aimed at the people who are killing the environment, and that's why we only have boys. So we have to first ask them what their interests are. We have to also see an investment in their interests in our city. For example, our boys love ATV riding. What opportunities are we going to create for them to do that safely and not have our passion criminalized and have them be arrested for something in us that we love to do? Music. One of the things that one does is have studio time for our young boys and get them off the street sometimes 4 or 5 hours a night to send them to different studios. We also build studios out in their communities. Our boys love music. We have to make an investment into that. They also love clothing. We like to make clothing, design clothing, cut it up, resell it. What is our investment in the interest in the things they're good at, the things they want to do, and the things they're interested in doing?
One of the things we did at KIP last year is that we were able to institute our growing up mentoring program. And what we did is that actually, Gail doesn't know it, I actually got it from her from a conversation. And what we said is, like, we wanted to look at what each student's passion was. We tried to come together and say, all right, what can we do as a business or a project that everybody would understand and get? So what we did was a fashion show. So Chloe and I were able to get together 10 students. Of course, you had some students fall off, which was amazing how it turned out. But basically, we were able to use that passion and get them to actually start to see it from a point of view of taking leadership roles, dividing who needs to do what, doing that, and also having the part to say, hey, we need to use this as a way to show that they can be peer, they can be peer-to-peer mediations, right? Because they were arguing about what needed to go down or what outfit was supposed to be worn by this person. So just wanted to say that's one of the things that we instituted in our program, also trying to be creative, looking at what students want, using that to our advantage to put them with a mentor that might even be in the same field. So I just wanted to add that also.
And I think that cuts off your time, but I would love to talk with you about it separately. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Representative Chang. Representative Wattenberg.
Representative Parker before me now? No. Okay, I'm ready. So I actually am going to start, I actually have the flip of what Mr. Chang had, which is to start with the policy. So I'm going to start with you. When you talk about policy, part of what I think of is, and just to sort of catch this all up, is that the program, we have the immediate term needs that the programs can respond to, but then we have the long-term need to get beyond where we are with the next generation. When I think of that and what's the policy, part of what I think about is sort of alleviating poverty. I mean, we've had sort of most recently with the pandemic is one example where there was actual cash payments to people to try to alleviate poverty, and DC did some of that, and the federal government did some of that, and I know there's been a lot of talk about that. So my question is that part of what you think of as policy, or what do you think of as policy in terms of?
Poverty is an indicator, but I'm not suggesting that we try to alleviate poverty through a policy measure. And black folks have always been poor by and large. You know, the vast majority of us have been poor and working class folks. But we didn't always have this. So we didn't always have this nihilism and hatred and willingness to kill one another. And our children kill one another. We didn't have that. So we really need to, and I feel like the way that we get to the next generation is through the school system. One of the measures that would be useful in the school system is at least as an experiment in 2 or 3 elementary schools, whole school restorative approach. And I think we might have to look into that. I'd be willing to talk some about it and help you to contact some people who have done that. I've worked with that. I worked in a whole school restorative school in New Orleans, and the difference was enormous between the grades that had started the restorative approach and the kids in the upper grades who hadn't. The kids hadn't gotten it. So I think that that's a really important thing. I think that we need to raise teachers' salaries so that we can have bigger pools of applicants for teachers. Teaching, we don't have enough people who are really talented and passionate about young people coming into the teaching profession. We have people leaving the teaching profession. And those are people who should remain there. We really should be digging in our heels about ways. I mean, what teachers are in is ridiculous. I also think that we should be looking at family supports. So by that I mean any family, any working family that is in any way involved in any public program, that one of the things that they get is an entire, well, I would say diagnosis, so to speak, but a problem solving and a needs assessment to help them to develop vision for the future for their children. You ask a lot of mothers who have to see the child, and they don't really have a strong idea of how they would like their child to move through life. And even if they had, they don't have the wherewithal to be able to walk behind them and keep them on track. So we really need to be able to support poor families in ways that really matter, particularly those who are raising children. And I also think that the curricula in schools are being revisited, particularly in secondary schools, because and in middle schools. Because middle schools is where poverty is. 8th grade, that's like a switch gets turned on the children, and they just behave differently. And so we should be focusing on that as they make that transition into puberty. School policy is a very difficult thing to really change. I understand that. Political winds are shifting constantly. But nobody, when things are tough, nobody says, let's make sure we look after the generation that's coming along. And I think that's really what has to happen. And there are a bunch of other things that I think about all the time. But I don't want to go on to get the gist of what we're talking about. We need to look at families and young people to help repair some of that damage that was done in the 80s, 90s, 20 years where just tremendous damage was done to our sector of this population in cities all across.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Representative Wattenberg. Representative Parker.
Thank you all for such a rich discussion. Mr. Nguyen, good to see you again. I'm going to ask a number of questions, some way in the weeds, so just be ready. So hypothetically speaking, let's say your group intervened and stopped a young person from being harmed. what does the longitudinal support look like for that young person so that maybe we stop something on Monday, but then inevitably something happens down the line?
For me and my team, to definitely let the school officials know about the whole ordeal and the situation, and also talk to the young individual to see what he know, to go after, the rival person, like neighborhoods and things like that, to talk to them. When the situation happened, we was able to identify the people that was involved, the individuals that was up there, and talk to them to definitely to get the truth.
Yeah.
And definitely that barrier that nothing can happen around school grounds, and basically let's get a truth about the situation at hand. Since then, KIP took the initial steps that they had to take that for security plan, but it was never another issue far as the young individuals coming back and things like that, because we got on top of it.
Really helpful. And so going back to this idea of action plans and having partners to take action on, and so where you talked about incident reports, where are those stored or documented? If one wanted to just go say, what are the incidents in this area?
To that, our incident reports get sent to our main contractor, and it goes to DME. Well, I can't tell you right.
And is that public information?
It should
And
be.
I ask not in a sense of Big Brother, but more so for the coordination and community engagement aspect that I heard several of you all talking about. What I see is that many people just don't know. They hear the gunshots, they see the issues in the community. They don't always know the hard work that is going in trying to prevent it.
I'll say this again, that was part of the rollout that we were talking about earlier. We submit the incident reports, and of course, we want to, make it available to you all. Where it goes after that, that's something that they're talking about now, because we saw
Gotcha.
that that's something that got dropped, in the.
But as you understand it, it's with the Deputy Mayor of Education.
It does
Gotcha.
definitely go to the Deputy Mayor of Education.
That is helpful. Ms. McDaniel, thank you. I echo what my colleagues have said, and I really appreciate this parallel you've drawn between the crack epidemic, as you call it, and at that time there was similar rhetoric of lock 'em up, tough on crime, what we're hearing now. And so I thought that was a perfect parallel. Again, in the weeds. In preparation for this meeting, I started looking at the crime data. And surprisingly, it says crime is down in DC compared to last year. Now, that's based on MPD statistics. That is, and I understand that may not include all of the incident reports, all of the incidents of shooting that are not documented. And so I bring this up to say, how are you all navigating the data keeping process? Kind of a similar question here, and where is that data going?
And so we are trying to coordinate under the OGVP, Office
Yes.
of Violence Prevention, to coordinate each of the agencies that touch on violence under the quick pay system, so we have some opportunity for some shared documents, of course, with certain privacy.
And is that open to the public?
Players as well. Now, if we will create versions that are open to the public, that at least update the public on what happened and what next steps will be, that you should have no concern, or retaliation might be likely to high, so that they're aware of it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Representative Parker. Representative Gasoy, did you have any questions?
First, I just want to apologize for coming in late. I know it's a very important conversation, and I will be viewing it on the recording. I do just have a quick question. Is it Mr. James? Yes. You had mentioned restorative schools, and that has piqued my interest. And I'm just wondering if you know more about how they operate. How do students end up there? Do they choose? Do the families choose that school? Is it a school that is recommended to certain students? And then just what is different about those schools? Do they have significantly more staff, different kinds of staff? So.
Because restorative schools, the restorative approach to education is not in the mainstream now, it takes a courageous superintendent and some courageous school leaders to decide they're going to experiment with it. And you will start in the lower grades, you start in preschool and in kindergarten. And it's very simple, restorative practice, circling children at the start of the day. Everyone talks about how they're feeling. It really is about based on feelings and language and building some social awareness and helping children to recognize that their classroom is a community. And they do that in circling, and any time there's a problem, the teaching does stop. And this is in the lower grades where it's less expensive to stop what they're doing. And by expensive, I mean not that much is lost in terms of teaching and learning. But to stop, analyze what has just happened, make the person who has created an uproar, who has harmed someone else, aware that this has harmed everyone, but not to do what normally happens in the classroom, which is put that child out, send them to the closet or the whatever, timeout room or wherever they send them, or to the disciplinarian. But keep that child in that environment with the rest of the students and help them to understand that we're with you, whatever it is that's bothering you. If you talk to us about it, we can help and we can feel better. And by the first grade, children are actually using emotional language in an entirely different way. And they're willing to say, we have to stop because I just saw such and such. I just saw Nancy poke Susie in the eye with a pencil, whatever. Or someone has a tantrum and throws the book. Well, now we have to stop. And everyone has to talk about how you felt, how frightened you were when you saw this child sort of act out his anger. And also, so it's really about community building. It's really about developing social emotional awareness and language and building empathy, a thing that normally is given by a family. That's normally something that's developed in the family. But so many families now have been victims of what we've gone through now, that children are not receiving that. That's the nihilism. And the willingness to just do some of the cool things that have happened now is really based on, it's based partly on unmet needs, but it's also based on not having a real sense of community that I'm connected to the other people in my community. So that's what the restorative approach is. When the children are walking to and from activities and classes in school, they tend to, and in the early grades, they walk together as a rule. But in the later grades, they tend to walk as a class because this is just something that they've learned. I'm with my people, I'm with my community.
Can I just ask you a quick question, because I'm looking at the time? So it sounds like it's more, you're saying it's an approach, it's not about hiring more staff, so I guess my question is,
not hiring more staff, but it's a different model.
how do they get trained, I guess is my question. Is that,
that's the real difference.
yeah. So is the investment, you said it takes a, strong superintendent to do this. Is the investment in the PD, do you know?
No, it doesn't have much of a financial impact.
Okay.
It has a political impact because some people will be against it because it's new. And it also is threatening to people who are part of a regime that has been going on for the past 80 years. And people sometimes will push back on something that they don't understand. But that's why I recommend doing it in 3 schools, doing it in 4 schools as an experiment. But we would then have to incentivize those staff because those staff have to be retrained in how they're going to manage the classrooms and what they talk about, the language that they use. They're all using the same language, including the janitor, including the coaches. Everybody's using the same restorative language. So it's a bold experiment, but really, really pays off. And I've seen it in a few schools, but it's not done often because it threatens the establishment, I think.
Thank you, Mr. James. President Sutter.
Thank you, and thank you all for this panel tonight. It's been an incredibly powerful conversation that's sort of run the gamut from root causes of violence and also how do we deal with the day-to-day that our children are experiencing, feeling, and seeing. I have 3 questions. We'll see if I can get through them all, but I'm going to get my first one to Ms. McDaniel. You talked earlier about this need for planning, actionable items, action plans, revisiting those things. Who should be doing that, and what resources do you need to make that happen?
So it's my understanding that the Office of Neighborhood Safety is partnering closely with the Office of Gun Violence Prevention, and that they will serve as the governing body over all gun violence strategies and processes. I know that some of those finalities are being worked out, But the goal is to get to a place where we are developing those tangible action steps, and we do have that centered governing body. And right now, the idea is that is the Office of Gun Violence Prevention.
Okay, thank you so much. Mr. Street, my next question is for you. I was really intrigued by your discussion around social media and social media training. One of the things we discussed as a board at our working session last week was, what can we do on this issue? And one thing our student representatives raised to us is this issue of the use of social media and how our young people experience that in connection to these kind of violent incidents. So what would you say this board can and should do after this panel?
Well, I think the first thing is that we got to create more spaces with experts that truly understand social media and digital platforms. Certainly, I respect the insights on, prevention, but what social media does, it takes away the cooling period. So while you can have a truce, and I'm grateful that there are truces and people are cooling down and certain people aren't doing certain things, social media can actually amplify that. If you go, it could be squashed at 3:30, but because social media is constant, it's sparked back up in a couple of hours. So we really need to figure out, what solutions, what ideas that we together can come up with to kind of help remedy some of these things. Again, social media doesn't have outlets, it doesn't have streets, it's constant, it's always moving. And so, schools, teachers, parents, all of us, we need to sit down and figure some of this stuff out. So I think spaces like this are a good start.
Thank you very much. I will ask my third question. We've heard a lot about the role SROs often used to play in schools as coordinators of data between MPD and schools around issues of violence that affected students. We know that SROs are being rolled back and are currently not present in schools. Who is taking their place in your experiences? And if no one has yet taken the place, who would you recommend be in those places?
Like that. Kids already, unfortunately, have like a bias or thought process with SROs almost like police. Unfortunately, right now, a lot of us are working with people to, give them a new look to children because we don't want them to be fear of MPD, security, and police. They're here to keep you safe just as well as violence and prevention programs. But in the essence of trying to replace what they're doing with SROs, I think that they should get more organizations that are on the ground in their community to come in and students. They know us. We're like, hey, Lil John, go to class. Why are you lagging behind? I got to get there. Now, you've been to the bathroom 3 times. You're coming up with anything. So I think bringing in some of these different organizations into the schools is giving them an opportunity to build relationships with students, build relationships with staff, build relationships with the parents. Because a lot of times now, we can call a parent. It's like, okay, don't worry, I'm going to call your mom. No, don't call my mom. No, I'm going to call her in a minute because I see that's what it is. And we have a relationship with the parent. And we think that's important because that also facilitates that parents sit down when there is a situation between two groups and things like that. So we think bringing in organizations such as ourselves into the schools to give that aspect of a safe feeling, but also someone they feel like they can approach when they feel unsafe.
Thank you so much. So my time has expired, and I think our panel time has expired. Is that accurate, Mr. Zhu?
Yes, President Sutter.
Thank you. I think our meeting's already calendared to end at 9:30 tonight, so I think we need to keep going. I want to appreciate this panel for all the time that you spent. It's been a super helpful conversation to all of us, so I want to leave you with our thanks. Our staff will definitely follow up with any outstanding questions, including those that might have come in a second round, and we bid you all a good evening.
Thank you very much. I would just like to say, while SROs are disappearing, social workers are disappearing.
Thank you, sir.
And one social worker for 5 SROs.
I appreciate that, Mr. James. Thank you. The State Board will now recess for 5 minutes. When we return, we'll welcome our public witnesses. Thank you all for that brief break. At every public meeting, we hear testimony from public witnesses on education-related matters. Your comments become part of our official record. If you would like to speak at a future public meeting, please sign up on our website at sboe.dc.gov or contact our staff by email at sboe@dc.gov or by phone at 202-741-0888. Tonight we have 4 individuals who submitted public testimony. We will hear from those in attendance in a single panel. Each witness will have up to 3 minutes to provide comments. Please note that you must use the microphone at the table. The microphone is already on. The timer light on the table will be green for the first 2.5 minutes, will turn yellow for the last 30 seconds, and will turn red after 3 minutes have elapsed. After our public witnesses speak, we will pause for questions from board members. Members will have 2 minutes for questions for our public witnesses. Those 2 minutes include their question, comment, and their answer. Mr. Ju will call the public witnesses to the table, as well as the question rounds. He will also assist with timing to ensure our witness and board members do not exceed their allotted time. Mr. Ju, you may begin by asking our public witnesses to come forward to the table.
Keisha Coleman. Allison Kreiner Brown. Scott Goldstein. Samantha Bertacci. Ms. Coleman, we can begin with you.
Good evening, President Sutter and members of the board. My name is Kishelle Coleman, a parent of former DCPS students and current Executive Director of Boys Town, Washington, D.C., located in Ward 5. We've been providing services to residents throughout the district for almost 30 years. We are currently partnering with 10 schools implementing the Show Up, Stand Out under the Mayor's Initiative. We also operate an outpatient behavioral health clinic. We offer parenting classes and case management services. I am here tonight to talk about the importance of maximizing learning through positive behavior supports and proactive strategies with students in the school setting by implementing the Boys Town Live Together model. Live Together with Boys Town is fostering stronger schools, stronger communities, and stronger families by bringing together educators, students, families, and Boys Town experts to address every student's social, emotional needs. Live Together is a multi-tiered intervention strategy that focuses on student interventions, teacher development, and parent engagement. In this 3-pronged approach, where children, parents, and schools are all speaking the same language, we give youth consistent expectations for their learning and behavior, assisting youth in developing their social, emotional skills, and empowering teachers with classroom behavioral management tools that enables them to get back to the work of teaching. This coordinated action is what makes the initiative so powerful, and that is why we call it Live Together, because only together can we truly change the life of a child. Live Together with Boys Town is currently operating in urban area schools in 4 states, and we have seen success after 1 year of implementation. In Nevada, suspensions were decreased by 56%. In New England, teachers reported a 58% favorable increase in school culture and climate, and in South Omaha, absences decreased by 21%. I am proposing that we replicate this model that has been successful in other urban jurisdictions in the District of Columbia. While exclusionary discipline is still the most broadly used model across our nation's schools, it continues to be the most ineffective model because it focuses on behaviors after they occur, and it literally takes students away from the educational environment they need to learn. Boys Town's experience and data show that we can successfully replace the exclusionary model and transform communities by creating safer schools and environments, which thereby results in places where children can grow and thrive through the implementation of our Live Together model. Thank you for your time and the opportunity to talk with you today. Additional information has been provided in my written testimony, and I will be honored to talk further about ways that we can collaborate and bring Live Together with Boys Town to the District of Columbia Public Schools.
Thank you, Ms. Coleman. Mr. Goldstein?
Good evening. Before I start, I just wanted to say on the whole school restorative approach in this conversation, I hope that's something you'll ask questions about. It's a really important topic. Thank you for taking up the topics of teacher retention this evening with resolutions supporting a WTU contract and strengthening teacher workforce data. But SBOE must do more. Teachers have been working on an expired contract for the past 3 years, just as they did for many years prior to that on the last agreement. In the meantime, the workforce has changed dramatically. A recent report from Wallet Hub, designed by 6 accomplished scholars, the most comprehensive I have ever seen on the subject, ranked DC the 3rd worst place to teach in the country, one of the lowest among states in salaries when adjusted for cost of living, and the single highest projected teacher turnover rate in the country. The methodology was comprehensive, accounting for everything from salaries to growth potential, student ratios to evaluation systems, commute times, and even a working mom friendliness rating. And when taking all 24 metrics into account, DC was the 3rd worst place to teach in the country. We can and must do better. We need to keep 4 things in mind. We need not only a WTU contract, but one that is fit for 2022, and the way that work has changed, keeping in mind that other jobs that educators are qualified for pay better while providing more flexible schedules. Even when the WTU did have a contract, teacher turnover in DC was the highest in the country. So we need a stronger contract than before, with real working condition protections, including increased planning time and more professional authority for teachers. But we need much more than a contract. Nearly half of our educators and half of our students attend charter schools, where teacher turnover is high as well. Many elected leaders are proposing incentive-based solutions to the crisis without working place condition changes. You cannot keep teachers in the profession by giving them more affordable housing, sabbaticals, and loan forgiveness if you don't do anything about the daily working conditions in schools. Both matter, but the data is clear: improved conditions must come first. As you know, the DC Council is holding a hearing on teacher and principal retention this coming Tuesday, October 25th. So the reason I am really here today is to implore all of you to raise your voices, and for all of those who are at home to testify on Tuesday. The deadline is Friday, and it is critical. I've been working to address this crisis for years, but this year is different. I'm regularly hearing ordinary, non-education world people talking about how teacher turnover, teacher shortages, and substitute shortages are impacting their kids not only academically, but emotionally. The State Board can look at data produced by Empower and the WTU about which solutions matter most to educators and convene policy officials to work towards consensus on changes. Imagine if each month the Teacher Practice Committee hosted experts focusing on one of the 20 key solutions proposed, or go in depth with a few of them. You can push your council members to use what they hear at hearings to actually take action, coordinate agencies, legislate where needed, and use oversight to tackle specific issues related to tension, not just general ones. You can ensure your council members have teacher retention solutions as part of their budget letter to the mayor now. I included here a more comprehensive list of solutions that teachers are proposing, and of course there's much more than this. But you, the members of the State Board, and the public can advocate for all of them. We need your voices. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Goldstein. We will turn to our student reps for questions first. Representative Bernstead.
Could you come back to me so I have time to look over the rest of this written testimony first?
That's fine. Representative Jones-Burgess, any questions?
I don't have any questions as of right now. Can you come back to me as well?
Okay. Representative Washington.
I also don't have any questions at this moment. Can you please come back to me?
Okay. We will go to our elected members. Representative Patterson.
I think I'm going to follow the trend. I don't have a question at this particular time, sir. Thank you.
All right. Representative O'Leary.
I have a question about Boys Town. How do you choose the schools that you're working with? Or do they choose you?
They choose us.
How do they know about it?
So part of my reason for being here today is to share, with the panel what we do and what we've seen successful in some of our other jurisdictions. The Boys Town is a nationwide organization. We're around in 7 sites. We in DC, we've been here for 30 years. We primarily operate our family home program, the child family services, and we've been operating as a provider for the show and our truancy investigations program. And so we just believe that we can do so much more in assisting with not only reducing truancy, but also with helping with the behavior management in the classroom, allowing teachers to get back to teaching, and allowing us to bring our behavioral expertise and our mental health services.
Thank you. And Mr. Goldstein, you know how I feel about a teacher contract, but is there any progress going on?
No one can know that other than the people in the room. So it's hard to know what the progress is or what the particular sticking points are. What I do want to emphasize is that you know, like I said, we had very high teacher turnover when there was a contract
Right.
previously, and the contract has to be different. And so if the holdouts are because we're trying to ask for more, I don't know that. But that's a good thing, because the contract has to be better than it was previously. We already had high turnover under the previous contract.
Thank you.
Up next, we will go to Representative Reed.
Yes, I was conferring with my colleague, Representative Patterson. Two questions for Boys Town. And you have a partnership with Achievement Prep in Ward 8? Okay. Okay. 'Cause, yeah, I always remember Boys Town for some reason. Growing up PG County is like the place where certain students went, but it was good to see it in a positive light. My questions are, your recommendations for scaling up. Is it just more schools, or do you have other strategies like maybe clusters of schools, since we have a lot of schools in a particular radius in Ward 8? That's question number one. And then I want to hear about how do you assist with truancy?
Is, you know, about us scaling up. It could be in a cluster. It really is where you all see the greatest needs, and we can talk about what the plan is for that school. One of the things that we like to do, we work in elementary and middle schools, and we like to be where there's a feeder school. So right now, we do have a school support specialist in Burville Elementary and Kelly Miller, and we chose it because of it being that feeder school. The pieces that we want to scale up to is having that actual school support specialist, someone in the building that can help with the behavior management and social skills development, allowing teachers to teach. We also have a well-managed schools model where we train all administrators in all the schools. So again, we're all talking the same language when we're interacting with the youth. We currently provide our care coordination services, and that's more of a case management. So we do home visits, we work with the parents, we try to figure out how do we mitigate barriers to truancy. And that's really how we deal with that truancy piece.
15 seconds. Mr. Goldstein, what are particulars for difference in the contract for WTU?
I don't know what the negotiations are, but what I would just say is that time is a thing that should be focused on, whether that's planning time or flexible time, how to give teachers time back.
Thank you. Representative Patterson, any questions yet? Okay. Representative Chang.
I yield my time.
Representative Weinberg.
Do I get your time? Could you, I have two things. Could you talk a little bit about the wallet hub? And then maybe I'll suggest a question for somebody else, which is to explain what some of the specific things are that people could negotiate in the contract. But
yeah, well, I would just say on the Wallet Hub study, I look at these things all the time, and when I saw the link, I said, oh, it's another silly, you know, online clickbait article that's just ranking things. And then I looked at it, and I was like, actually, no, this is a very serious academic study. And it had a much more detailed picture than I've seen from anybody else in terms of rating that quality of life of an educator in each state that these 6 academics put together. And it included things that are very relevant to today that people hadn't been considering, for example, 5 years ago, like the working mom friendliness rating, for example, commute times and other things that are very relevant in DC because we have so many teachers who live in Prince George's County, for example, who live in Fairfax or Arlington. So there were a lot of components to the Wallet Hub study that I thought were very relevant to DC. And so for DC to come in the position it did in a study that considered all those was really disappointing. And I think really runs contrary to some of the things we consider about pay, for example, right? Because in pure dollars, obviously, DC has very high teacher pay in DC public schools. But it is close to last in terms of pay when accounting for cost of living as they studied it. And then if you look at the charter
even
sector,
with DCPS.
DCPS, right? And, well, this is looking at all of DC in the Wallet Hub study, so that's including the charter sector. And of course, in the charter sector, we have half of schools who have starting full-time roles that are below a living wage, and then paraprofessionals who are really earning sub-living wages.
Thank you.
Representative Bernstad.
Okay, thanks for coming back to me. I needed a second to review the list and Mr. Goldstein's written testimony. I have two questions, and I'm just going to ask them both now, but they're unrelated. The first is, I noticed a lot of these actions are things like hiring or expanding different positions. Is there anything you think schools can do with ESSER dollars, noting that this money can't really be used to create new roles? And then noting that the contract between the WTU has gone into arbitration, is there anything you think folks should be paying particular attention to once we have more information about kind of any updates on the contract? I'm sorry, that was really wordy.
Yeah, no, I mean, the ESSER dollar is a really good question because it is limited in some ways, but in other ways it's actually really flexible. And so there are, for example, educator wellness programming that we do in schools right now is funded by ESSER dollars. And there are 5 organizations, including EmpowerEd, that are working with 25 schools right now to do educator wellness programming. That money could certainly be expanded with existing funds to cover more schools, so that's something that could be done immediately and is having a real impact on teacher retention at those schools that we're working with. And that ESSER funding obviously expires at the end of the fiscal year, which means DC has to seriously consider now which of these things on the list are funded by ESSER dollars and what they're going to locally fund for the coming school year. And I think that includes educator wellness and retention programming, as well as some of these positions. There are schools that have full-time wellness coordinators, and the world of difference that makes for both student and adult wellness is remarkable. So that's a thing I think that should be really looked into, the schools that have those positions and the difference it makes.
Okay, and I'll follow up with you about the second question later because 20 seconds is not enough time, I think, to answer that. But thank you.
Representative Bernstad, I believe Representative Washington has yielded her time, so if you want to ask your question.
Okay, thank you, Taya. So I'll re-ask it. Noting that the WTU contract has now gone into arbitration, I hope I'm saying that word correctly. What should we be looking for when we get any updates about the contract? Like, what are some key things you think we need to see to determine if this negotiation was at some capacity successful, or what we might need to,
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot on the list I think that you could look for to put a contract up against. And one of those, like I said before, is time. You know, when you compare us to countries that are performing much better in some of the key areas, teacher planning time is just considerably less here than in other places. In fact, in many of the countries that we often compare ourselves to on international testing, we have almost a half of the amount of teacher planning time that they have. So typically you're looking at a 2-to-1 ratio or a 1-to-2 ratio. In other words, there should be an hour of planning time for 2 hours of instruction. We're about a quarter, right? So that's a key thing I would look for in a contract, and I would be fighting hard for it if I were in the room. There are other things about teacher time, but I would also look at the wraparound supports, because what teachers want is not just things for teachers, right, to make our own lives better. What we want is more support for student wellness. What we want is, you know, more social workers, psychologists, the community school models expanding, which is another interesting thing to talk about with ESSER dollars. More restorative justice programming, as has been mentioned today. If you do all those wraparound things, teachers' job is teaching, right, and can really focus on that. And so there's a lot that can be done, and the contract can facilitate that. I would also say there are schools throughout the country that are teacher-led schools. For example, there's 115 or something of them at this point. And what they do is actually they negotiate flexible contracts with the district, separate from the union contract in a way, that says, actually, we're okay meeting more than 1 hour after school because teachers are dedicated to this certain mission-driven thing that we want to do. And so can you have kind of contract set-asides where teachers want to take on more leadership in the school is a really innovative thing that's happening in some places that I'd love to see here.
Okay, thank you. And I'm sure we'll hear more from you and other folks at EmpowerEd after the contract arbitration is over.
Representative Parker.
Thank you both. One, I just want to give voice to the written testimony. Sorry about that. I want to give voice to the written testimony from Allison Kreiner Brown, which I'm contextualizing. She's speaking to the absence of marching band funding for all of our high schools. And I think that is a very noteworthy focus, and it might be something for our Advocacy and Outreach Committee to take up, because the spirit of her comments are that in a city like ours that has Go-Go Now as a declared music of our city, we should have more arts access for our students, and I agree completely. Ms. Coleman, it's good to see you again. I have one quick question, which is piggybacking off her, the scaling versus multiplying question that my colleague asked earlier. So, given our conversation earlier about external partners trying to work their way into our schools, namely within DCPS, is there a function or a capacity of your organization that could serve as an intermediate training or facilitator to use your model and program to train others to do the thing versus you exactly doing it?
Absolutely. So as part of the program is with our well-managed school model, we would come in, we would do the training, and then there's some consultation that goes along with it. And for sustainability, you can also look to do the trainer so that you can continue to maintain for new teachers or refreshers for teachers that are coming. For that particular portion, the school support specialist is a staff person of ours that have an office in the school building that works directly in the school with you all and do that work. We come in, we do observations of that particular staff person and try to help, work with them and give them feedback around how they're working with the kids. So you can for the training portion for the teacher development.
Is it possible to get like 30 seconds more? I wanted to ask.
I think your time has expired, I'm sorry. Representative Gasoy.
To yield or not to yield? No, I will not. Sorry. Ms. Coleman, thank you so much for raising or just sharing the program with us. I have heard of it, but it was important to hear more, and I will ask you offline sort of how we can promote more. Mr. Goldstein, I have some specific questions about your list. So one of the ideas on your list is to fund wellness coordinators for all schools. Do we have some schools with wellness coordinators at the time, and if so, how many, and how do they work?
Sorry, yeah, typically they're community school or connected school models have those, and then a lot of charter schools have that position. So we're working with a Monument Academy, for example, a charter school that has a full-time wellness coordinator, and the work that she does is incredible. I'm hoping actually she can testify on Tuesday to talk about what she does. But Monument is really doing some amazing things. They have, on Friday, they actually have a flexible scheduling model with a half day built in for wellness and a full-time wellness coordinator who's managing that work. But she is a student wellness coordinator and an adult wellness coordinator at the same time. So she's thinking holistically about what wellness is in the building in a school that is dealing with students, not only students who are at risk, but students who have significant trauma at home and who are there in a full-time boarding capacity during the week. So there's a lot of needs. And so that wellness coordinator is critical at a school like that. Anacostia, for example, is a connected school, and so there is someone managing in that role, but they also have a lot of other jobs, and that's
Can I just clarify that? So in the connected or community schools, is it the coordinator that is also the teacher wellness, or is that an extra person?
It depends on the school. Sometimes there's a social worker or a school psychologist who also functions as the head of the wellness team for the school, and then sometimes the connected school manager will take on some of that work.
Okay, I'm out of time. That was weird. I have many other questions, but I know where to find you.
Representative Parker, Representative Patterson yielded his time to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Goldstein, I wanted to zero in on one of the recommendations, which was to provide student loan relief to teachers. I know that might have been presented more as a hypothetical. One, I wanted to ask, are there examples where you've seen in other jurisdictions that type of policy implemented? And then two, hypothetically speaking, in the future, if legislators were interested in that, might that be something that Empower It could help do research on to just try to build the landscape of what that could look like in a DC context?
So you might be happy to know that each of these recommendations here is accompanied by pages of research links that our research team has compiled. So each of these we have a research team now, which is amazing, of teachers, and their job is to look at all these recommendations and put together a research report, essentially. So we have a lot on student.
So you mean you're not just putting random bullets in your test?
So there is a whole research report on other states and student loan forgiveness, and there's some states, for example, that do it at really critical times, and that's what I would look at. What is the right amount of service to do the student loan forgiveness on top of federal student loan forgiveness? In other words, there is already teacher student loan forgiveness at a federal level. But if you position it at a place where educators are usually burning out and leaving, this might be year 7, this might be year 9, but thinking very strategically about what year you give the additional local loan forgiveness, it can be a really good retention tool, but targeted at the right time in the teacher trajectory.
That's interesting. I was thinking more of it as a tool to attract teachers to the workforce.
In most states, it is like you
versus
have
a
to do this many
retention.
years of service to do it. I'm
Gotcha.
not saying that should have to be, but most states do set it up for a certain amount of years of service. They do use it as a recruitment tool. They say if you come to our district and teach for this many years, you'll get the forgiveness.
Another roadblock I imagine could exist is the legality of it. I am a teacher, let's say, and I don't have student loans, and now you're getting student loan forgiveness, and now I'm filing suit because that's unfair to me. And so if you could share any research that you all have compiled, that could be really helpful.
Of course, and just like the federal government, the Biden administration just struggled with, what about the parents who hold the loans instead of the students holding the loans for the student, and how do you deal with that? So there's a lot of complications to it.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Let me turn to Representative Jones Burgess just to confirm. No questions? Okay, perfect. President Sutter, close out.
Thank you. Thank you both for being here tonight. Very nice to see you again, Ms. Coleman. I know I owe you an email. So delighted that you came to share with the entire board tonight. Mr. Goldstein, I wanted to ask you a question. I appreciate this list so much because I think it's an important list for building what these policies might need in order to succeed. So for instance, the data warehouse amendment would get a lot of new data, to your point about like, how do we strategize what the right year is to deploy certain incentives? Well, we have to understand better when folks are departing the system, et cetera. I wanted to ask, though, about sort of barriers/enabling conditions that might be needed to put in place some of these policies. So some seem more complicated. To Representative Parker's point, would require council legislation and legal studies. But are there things the board could be advocating for, not specific actions per se, but policies or enabling conditions that would help some of these go in more smoothly?
Make me go through the list really fast. So I would say there's some low-hanging fruit, right? So I mean, like parking pass, for example. This has been talked about for a really long time.
I'm fighting with my neighbors about it right now.
It's a pretty simple thing. It would make a difference for some people. So I mean, there's some low-hanging fruit there. I think in terms of enabling conditions, HR policies, right, and the people who deal with HR policies. Right now, to make flexible scheduling work, for example, we just do not have, part of that's the contract, but part of it's not. We just don't have the HR set up. For example, we have wages as earned in DC public schools. That's very limiting in terms of what people can use wages as earned for to teach one class, for example. But we have a lot of retired educators that would probably love to come teach 1 or 2 periods and not teach the whole day, and that could make up for a lot of the shortage, but we don't have HR policies to support them doing that. And I think a lot of these depend on HR policies that are not fit for 2022.
Very helpful. Thank you so much.
President Sutter, that does conclude the public comment portion.
Thank you. I want to thank both of our public witnesses as well as those who submitted testimony for their comments tonight. We deeply appreciate both of you coming down to our old council chambers to testify in person. We will continue to work on as many ways as possible to make a hybrid meeting posture possible. As you saw tonight, we're still struggling with some AV needs, and those are not wholly under our control. So we appreciate that you were here tonight, and we hope to see folks in a hybrid posture again soon. Thank you. Members, we're going to move now to our votes, and we move through these beginning with our ceremonial resolutions. Our first ceremonial resolution is CR 22-30, recognizing National Domestic Violence Awareness and Prevention Month. At this time, I will make the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. The motion has been seconded by Dr. Reed. The resolution being properly moved and seconded, Mr. Jew will read the resolution into the record.
All right, let me prepare my reading voice.
We have a lot tonight.
We do have a lot this evening. State Board of Education ceremonial resolution recognizing National Domestic Violence Awareness and Prevention Month, CR 22-3. Whereas the United States recognizes National Domestic Violence Awareness and Prevention Month each year from October 1st to 31st, an observance that was first begun in October 1989. Whereas the purpose of National Domestic Violence Awareness and Prevention Month is to honor the courage and resilience of survivors and honor the dedication of advocates and service providers working to help prevent and address domestic violence and create a culture that refuses to tolerate abuse. Whereas according to the DC Coalition Against Domestic Violence, nearly 40% of women and 25% of men in the District of Columbia have experienced intimate partner physical violence, sexual violence, and/or stalking in their lifetimes, numbers that are higher than the national average. Whereas according to the 2019 ASA Youth Risk Behavior Survey, 1 in 8 middle and high schoolers reported experiencing physical or sexual dating violence, and LGBTQIA+ students being 2 times more likely to report dating violence compared to their heterosexual peers. Whereas according to the DC Coalition Against Domestic Violence, housing is the biggest need of domestic violence survivors, and 44% of homeless adults with families in DC report a history of domestic violence. Whereas there are multiple community organizations in DC working to support survivors of domestic violence, providing access to housing, counseling, and other needed support services, including the District Alliance for Safe Housing, DASH, DC Safe, House of Ruth, and My Sister's Place. And whereas the DC Health Education Standards include expectations that middle and high school students will learn about healthy relationships, how to recognize intimate partner violence, and be able to identify and analyze existing laws to protect young people from intimate partner violence. Now therefore be it resolved that the DC State Board of Education recognizes and observes National Domestic Violence Awareness and Prevention Month and works towards promoting quality preventative education in all levels of schools to raise awareness and thwart continued instances of domestic violence.
Thank you. Is there discussion on the resolution? I'll make an opening comment if that's all right, and then I'll pass to my colleague, Dr. O'Leary. I've shared with this body and with others before that I'm a survivor of domestic violence, having experienced intimate partner violence in my 20s. And to me, the work that schools have to do in helping young people understand what healthy relationships are, what they are not, and be able to recognize those in themselves and in their peers is extraordinarily important. So I'm pleased that the board is considering this resolution again this year, and will continue to ask how our schools are handling this important education work with our students. Dr. O'Leary?
I would just like to emphasize that most of this is about partners, but our children are the recipients of domestic violence, not just as secondary recipients, but also from their parents or whoever is in charge of the household. And they bring it to the school. And we need to make sure that there's someone in the school besides the teacher who can take care of that problem. And it's really hard for children to talk, just as in any kind of an abusive situation, it's very hard for people to admit that it happened, and especially with young children, because they are in fear of repercussions after the fact.
Further discussion? Dr. Reed?
I just want to say thank you, President Sutter. I know you reached out related to including the sexual assault work in this, and I wasn't able to get back with you, but thank you for the consideration of melding these two projects together. And just a small technical note, just to make sure we're reaffirming to our LGBTQIA+ community. I think we have a couple letters transposed that we should fix before processing, but thank you all for putting this together.
Thank you, Dr. Reed, and thank you for that good catch. Any other discussion? Seeing no further discussion, the motion is on adoption of CR 22-30. All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. The ayes have it, and the motion carries. Our next ceremonial resolution is CR 22-31, recognizing Dyslexia Awareness Month. Representative Chang, would you like to make the motion?
Yes, please.
A motion has been made by Representative Chang. Is there a second?
Second.
The motion has been seconded by Dr. O'Leary. The resolution being properly moved and seconded, Mr. Zhu will read the resolution into the record.
State Board of Education ceremonial resolution recognizing Dyslexia Awareness Month, CR 22-31. Whereas on October 11th, 1985, President Ronald Reagan issued Proclamation 5385, declaring the month as Learning Disabilities Awareness Month. Whereas Learning Disabilities Awareness Month provides the nation the opportunity to turn its attention to the 1 in 5 students who learn differently because they have learning and/or attention difficulties, including the 2.5 million who have specific learning disabilities such as dyslexia, dysgraphia, and dyscalculia, and the 6 million who have been diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Whereas Learning Disabilities Awareness Month helps to raise awareness among school leaders, educators, parents, and communities about how to create and foster a world where children with learning disabilities are understood, valued, and able to thrive. Whereas the Office of the State Superintendent of Education committed under its 2019-23 strategic plan to, quote, catalyze progress and dramatically shift the trajectory of growth for students with disabilities. Whereas district-based organizations like Advocates for Justice in Education and Decoding Dyslexia DC have been staunch allies in the elevating of and advocating for issues related to students with learning disabilities, including the passage of Bill 23-0150, Dyslexia and Other Reading Disabilities Screening and Prevention Pilot Program Act of 2019, that calls on OSSI to establish a dyslexia and other reading disabilities screening and intervention pilot program for public school students. Whereas the Office of the Student Advocate and Decoding Dyslexia DC created a dyslexia guidebook for the school year 2022-23 as a resource for families with students who struggle with reading, spelling, or number sense to advocate for additional support within schools. And whereas OSSI and the Office of the Ombudsman for Public Education have created a special education hub to provide families of students with disabilities resources and assistance in navigating special education within DC schools. Now therefore be it resolved that the DC State Board of Education recognizes Learning Disabilities Awareness Month and all the students with learning disabilities and their families and the tireless advocates who serve and support them in their goals and endeavors. And be it further resolved that the State Board recognizes and values the importance of the universal design for learning, providing multiple means of engagement, representation, and expression for all learners to be and feel included and successful.
Thank you. Is there discussion? Representative Chang, and then I'll come to Representative Wattenberg.
Thank you, Representative Wattenberg. Your hand did come up first. If you...
We'll reverse the order.
I just wanted to really acknowledge the enormous work that's been done on this issue by different advocacy groups here in DC. The resolution talks about AJE and Decoding Dyslexia DC, and both of them have just done an enormous job of raising the issue, and it's been part of really helping me to understand, sort of learn a basic political science lesson about the reciprocal relationship really between our advocates and ourselves as a public body. I think it's helped them that we've been able to go to the council and argue for things, and it's helped us that they continue to come. So many, many thanks. I think it's everybody's joint work on this that has moved it as far as it has. And likewise, enormous kudos to Representative Chang, who has really helped to make it, give it a life here on the board with his support for a number of things, including the upcoming legislation on this. So that's all. Thank you.
Representative Chang.
Thank you, Representative Wattenberg. Thank you, President Sutter. Appreciate this opportunity once again to raise this issue with this board and remind folks that only 30% of fourth graders in DC are reading proficiently at grade level. One thing I want to also echo today that I've heard from Mary Clayman and many reading instructors over and over again is that investments and interventions that are crucial for students, dyslexic students, harm nobody and help many. And so for thinking about, for this Dyslexia Awareness Month, thinking about not only the interventions that will support dyslexic students, but the many other students who would benefit alongside is something that I want to remind folks as well. Thank you.
Is there further discussion? Dr. O'Leary.
We talk a lot about months for different causes and things like that, but this, what is mentioned in the second whereas about dyslexia and all the other disses and ADHD should not be just a month. It should be 365 days a year. And there needs to be testing of every single student from the time that they're 4 years old so that we can identify these students with these disabilities, all right? And we don't have any kind of a structure set in place in the citywide in order to do that. And that's another emergency besides the violence that we talked about earlier.
Thank you, Dr. O'Leary. Seeing no further discussion, the motion is on adoption of SCR 22-31. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. The ayes have it, and the motion carries. Our third ceremonial resolution is CR 22-32, recognizing National Bullying Prevention Awareness Month. I'm going to move this motion on behalf of Vice President Thompson. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Patterson. The motion has been seconded by Dr. Patterson. The resolution has been properly moved and seconded, and Mr. Zhu will read the resolution into the record.
State Board of Education ceremonial resolution recognizing National Bullying Prevention Awareness Month, CR 22-32. Whereas the United States recognizes National Bullying Prevention Awareness Month each year from October 1st to 31st, an observance that first began in October 2006. Whereas the purpose of National Bullying Prevention Awareness Month is to provide resources and education to schools and communities to prevent childhood bullying and encourage unity through acceptance, inclusion, and kindness. Whereas students who experience bullying are at increased risk from mental health, physical health, and behavior problems such as depression, anxiety, sleep difficulties, and low academic achievement. Whereas according to a 2019 National Center for Educational Statistics report, 1 out of every 5 students had been bullied, and 28% of bullying reports occurred at middle schools, which was the highest number of reported offenses amongst elementary and secondary grades. Whereas the Council of the District of Columbia passed the Youth Bullying Prevention Act of 2012 to address bullying, requiring different district agencies and educational institutions that provide services to youth to create a bullying prevention policy. Whereas the District of Columbia Public Schools created a bullying prevention policy that provide guidelines for educators, school staff, and administration to follow in addressing instances of bullying to create a safe learning environment for its students. Whereas in 2013, the District of Columbia Office of Human Rights created the citywide Youth Bullying Prevention Program to reduce instances of bullying across the District of Columbia by adopting a public health approach that focuses on prevention and supporting at-risk youth. Whereas the Office of the Ombudsman for Public Education receives a high volume of concerns about school violence and bullying, and to address bullying concerns, the Office of the Ombudsman ensures that families are informed about school bullying prevention policies, communicates with school administrators about the bullying, and facilitates the development of safety plans for students targeted by bullying, as well as supports families to ensure that targeted students receive resources and supports available, including access to mental health resources. And whereas the Office of the Student Advocate supports students and families navigating pressures stemming from challenges within the district's school climate and culture, and offers resources and supports to students and families seeking options and solutions to incidents of bullying and harassment, as well as host on its website, advocate.dc.gov, a podcast conversation about citywide bullying prevention and right-to-know resource sheets. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the D.C. State Board of Education recognizes and observes National Bullying Prevention Awareness Month and works to inform preventative education to create safe learning environments and increase community safety among youth.
Thank you. Is there discussion? Dr. Patterson.
First of all, I want to say thank you to this board for bringing this resolution forward. I'm literally sitting here looking at a letter that I received through our official account of a Ward 5 parent. Her name is Stacy Robinson Yonkers. It was sent to me 2 years ago about, she lives in Ward 5, about her children being bullied. And I can't speak enough to how common bullying is in schools and how we need to be as proactive as we possibly can to push, other leaders, schools, to make sure that we're addressing it where it is. Some of you know my son was bullied last year to the point where he had to be transferred to another school due to the mental health and stress that was causing him. So I take this very personal, and this young lady who has, this parent who has reached out to me through a mutual friend, I want to make sure that we are addressing their problems, we're being responsive to them, but also elevating just how much this is affecting our children, especially coming off of COVID and some of the problems that we have in our schools and what our children are dealing with. And this is their way of, just trying to deal with problems and just everything. And just really want to thank thank each one of you for, being part of this push to stop bullying where it is. Like my colleague said, Dr. O'Leary, this is not a, month thing. This is a 365 days a year where we need to be addressing programs that allow children to learn how to, resolve their issues, but also to make sure that we understand why these things are happening on a regular basis. So thank you again.
Thank you, Dr. Patterson. Further discussion? Representative Gasoy?
Just very quickly, I think this is something that needs to be thought about more holistically than it is in our system, and it relates to, the teacher turnover crisis that we have in the city, and also just the teacher stress level that we have. I think solving that also helps to address some issues around bullying, because when the adults in our schools are spread thin, then they do not have the capacity really to address or be proactive about stopping bullying before it starts. So I also think that we need to be more serious in our system about bringing in the kinds of partners that we heard from today that are specifically geared towards preventing violence, but also that provide students things that make them think about other things, that gives them things that they're passionate about. And so I would like to see an expansion of those things as well. But overall, just looking at this as a ecosystem problem, a more holistic approach would be preferable. So that's all.
Thank you, Dr. Gasoy. Further discussion? Representative Bernstad.
I wanted to kind of echo what both Representative Patterson and Representative Gasoy said in two different ways. First, I think the impact COVID had on bullying was profound because a lot of students, like COVID hit my freshman year, so the current freshman class, their last regular year before COVID was half of 6th grade. Throughout middle school, you learn a lot of conflict resolution skills that you just don't get from being on Zoom. So I think that I'm hopeful that as we ease back in person and students are getting the same kind of social time with their peers now, that maybe we'll see a change. I don't think that means we do nothing, but I think, we can be a little hopeful. And then the other thing I think is that it's important to recognize, like Dr. Gasoy said, that these aren't divorced from any other work the board is doing, i.e. when we talk about safe passage, it's also bullying. It's really easy to think of bullying, especially now, as more emotional harassment, which it most definitely is, but physical harassment is also bullying, and it's also important to think of it not in the context or the confines of just being in the building. When we know that if students are unsafe walking home from school and are targeted, that is bullying, even if it doesn't occur by one of their peers. And then I'm hopeful that in any work the board or other agencies the district does to engage issues of safe passage or violence interrupters, that these are also ways that we're thinking about bullying, because when we expand our definition of what bullying is, like beyond the school or beyond like peer-to-peer conflict, I think we're just able to take an approach that is more, my brain's not working because it's the end of the day, take approach that is more consistent and reflective of what the reality is. Like in DC, kids aren't taking each other's lunch money, but kids are being physically violent. Yeah.
Thank you, Representative Bernstad. Further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, the motion is on adoption of CR 22-32. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. The motion carries. Our final ceremonial resolution is CR 22-33, celebrating National Principals Month. Representative O'Leary, would you like to make the motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Gasoy. The resolution being properly moved and seconded, Mr. Zhu will read the resolution into the record.
State Board of Education ceremonial resolution recognizing National Principals Month, CR 22-3. Whereas each October, state and local leaders, teachers, and other school-based staff, students, parents, and community members come together to celebrate and honor the tireless work and dedication principals provide in the pursuit of ensuring a quality education for every student. Whereas the American Federation of School Administrators, the National Association of Elementary School Principals, and the National Association of Secondary School Principals collaborated to designate October as National Principals Month. Whereas this National Principals Month especially recognizes the many challenges principals face during the COVID-19 pandemic, with principals working to ensure the health, safety, and well-being of students, their families, school-based staff, and communities, while standing by to adapt and respond to health-related policies. Whereas research shows after instruction, strong leadership comes second as a school-based factor affecting student achievement. Whereas according to a report from NASSP and the Learning Policy Institute, nearly 1 in 5 principals leave their schools each year, leading to higher rates of teacher turnover and subsequently impacting students' academic success. And whereas the DC State Board of Education has commissioned 3 reports on teacher and principal retention in the district, revealing that similar to national and urban principal turnover rates, DC public schools and district public charter schools, principal turnover levels have been around 25%. And the Office of the State Superintendent of Education has now published a comprehensive DC Educator Workforce Report. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the DC State Board of Education advocates for recognition of and appreciation for the hard work and leadership district principals bring to their profession, as well as urge for adequate and equitable professional development opportunities to ensure they are provided with the best training to meet the needs of their schools and students. And now, therefore, be it resolved that the DC State Board of Education recognizes National Principals Month and all of the hardworking principals that serve our schools, students, and communities.
Thank you. Is there discussion? Dr. O'Leary?
Before I came on the State Board of Education, I was focused on working in the school, and I worked for, I think, 10 principals. Being on the State Board of Education and visiting the schools throughout the ward, especially once the pandemic hit, it's amazing how the great principals in Ward 4 who work 28 hours a day and have kept their schools together. And this is, they deserve any kind of recognition they can get. Thank God they got a raise, they got a contract, and hopefully the people that work for them will too.
Thank you, Dr. O'Leary. Further comment, Dr. Reed?
Sure. I want to raise, and I know Ward 8 has a bunch of great principals, but one of the principals actually sent me there was awards for DCPS, for the standing ovation honorees, there we go. And 2 of the Ward 8 DCPS principals were noted, including William Haith from Anacostia High School and Charlotte Butler Strickland from Hart Middle School for the leading the way for innovation in our schools. The award for school leaders, so I wanted to recognize them as they are recognized by DCPS. And I also want to, of course, recognize our charter principals. I'm sorry, I just don't know what the awards were for that, but I know that many of them frequently invite me into the buildings. I get to witness the great work that they're doing as well. And then shout out to our assistant principals, because I'm not sure if they get a month. So,
Thank you, Dr. Reed. Is there further comment on the resolution? Seeing no further comment, the motion is on adoption of CR 22-33. All in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed say nay. The motion carries. Thank you all. Members, at this time, we're going to move to our votes on the 4 state resolutions. As a reminder to the viewing public, state resolutions may be submitted as an item for consideration by any member, provided the submission is made at least 7 business days prior to the start of the meeting, the date of the meeting at which the consideration is desired. And state resolutions include, at a minimum, a title or description, supplementary material as necessary to explain its need, a statement on how the state resolution will increase equity in education in the District of Columbia. The State Board has also recently adopted the practice of sending all state resolutions to the Student Advisory Committee for their review and consideration.
We thank and remind all members who attended the SAC meeting to present on their resolutions. And I want to use this moment to just say to our student representatives who chair the SAC, thank you very much for your attendance and discussion of our resolutions at this meeting, and we will do a better job as members making sure we personally attend so that if you have questions about our resolutions, we'll be present for you to answer, to ask those questions of us directly. So thank you for discussing them, and we'll make sure to be there to have that discussion with you. For each of the state resolutions, I will look for a motion and a second. This will be followed by Mr. Zhu reading each into the record. After Mr. Zhu reads the resolution into the record, I'll turn to our student representatives to share the SAC statements. This will be followed by member discussion in 2-minute rounds of statements before roll call votes are conducted. Our first state resolution is SR 22-8 on amending committees and appointments. I'll move this resolution. Is there a second? Thank you, Dr. Gasoy. The resolution being properly moved and seconded, Mr. Zhu will read the resolution into the record.
State Board of Education Resolution on amending committees and appointments, SR 22-8. Whereas the DC State Board of Education is committed to increasing public awareness and understanding of public education issues and policies in the District of Columbia and supporting their improvement, especially for our most vulnerable students. Whereas the public has benefited from the State Board's establishment of standing and ad hoc committees because their work helps efficiently move the priorities of the State Board forward. Whereas the State Board has had its members join public-facing and district-wide task forces in service of better understanding, discussing, and engaging on specific education issues. And whereas at its October 12th working session, the State Board discussed amending committee assignments to include the 3 new school year 22-23 student representatives, as well as an appointment to the Office of the State Superintendent of Education's Early Literacy Education Task Force. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the State Board's standing and ad hoc committees have the following members through December 31st, 2022. Administrative, Ebony Rose Thompson, Jacques Patterson, and Emily Gasoy. Assessments and Accountability, Jacques Patterson, Emily Gasoy, Ruth Wattenberg, and Carlene Reed. Education Standards, Alistair Chang, Ruth Wattenberg, Fraser O'Leary, Zachary Parker, and Leif Bernstad. Outreach and Advocacy, Carlene Reed, Emily Gasoy, Fraser O'Leary, Ebony Rose Thompson, China Jones Burgess, Anthony Wages, and Taya Washington. Teacher Practice and School Supports, Fraser O'Leary, Emily Gasoy, Alistair Chang, and Ebony Rose Thompson. And Board Governance, Ebony Rose Thompson, Jacques Patterson, Ruth Wattenberg, and Zachary Parker. Be it further resolved that Representative Alistair Chang be appointed to the OSSE Early Literacy Education Task Force.
Thank you. Is there discussion on the resolution? Dr. Gasoy.
I think there's an error. I am not on the Teacher Practice Committee.
Noted.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gasoy. Dr. Reed.
Just curious about, I know the attendance task force may have been dissolved and a few other task force or committees that I'm not sure, that outside appointments that I just haven't heard in a while. Can we get an update on what those are and who's appointed?
Yes, so as my understanding, thank you for that question, Dr. Reed. My understanding is that the Everyday Counts Task Force has been dissolved. There are plans forthcoming, and Mr. Zhu will fill in if I am missing information here. There are plans forthcoming to assemble something new. They have not yet been declared. I had not intended for this iteration of the board to nominate folks to any additional external committees, and rather to leave that to the next edition of the board, who will take office in January 2023. Thank you, Dr. Reed. Representative Parker.
Following up on Representative Gasoy's note, my name is missing, so if we could just perhaps swap the two.
For which committee, Representative Parker?
Teacher Practice and School Supports.
Okay, that may be the error. Thank you.
So we'll make these technical changes. Thank you very much for placing names. Representative Bernstad.
I just want to appreciate that student representatives are on committees, and that's such a fun and cool thing that happens, and that we can vote on committees. And also plug, because we're going to be talking about this at the NASB annual conference in Phoenix, and why it's so important that students have things like votes on committees, so you should totally come to our conference session. Thank you.
I like the conference session plug. Well placed, Representative Bernstead. Any further discussion? Wonderful. Seeing no further discussion, the motion is on adoption of SR 22-8. Mr. Zhu will call the roll.
Representative Bernstead?
Aye.
Representative Jones-Burgess?
Aye.
Representative Wages? Representative Washington?
Aye.
Representative Gassoy?
Aye.
Representative Chang?
Aye.
Representative Wattenberg?
Aye.
Representative O'Leary?
Aye.
Representative Parker?
Aye.
Representative Reed?
Aye.
Representative Patterson?
Aye.
Representative Thompson? And Representative Sutter.
Aye.
The motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Zhu. Our next state resolution is SR 22-9, recommendations on strengthening teacher retention and workforce data. Representative O'Leary, would you like to make the motion?
So moved.
A motion has been made by Representative O'Leary. Is there a second?
Second.
The motion has been seconded by Dr. Patterson. The resolution being properly moved and seconded, Mr. Zhu will read the resolution into the record.
State Board of Education resolution, recommendations relating to strengthening teacher retention and workforce data, SR 22-9. Whereas since 2018, the DC State Board of Education has prioritized the issue of teacher retention through several reports, surveys, legislation, and advocacy. Whereas one focus of the State Board's advocacy on teacher retention has been to push for better and more accessible teacher data, as there is still no publicly accessible statewide data system that tracks enrollment on all teachers in district schools. Whereas such data would allow school leaders and policymakers to identify teacher retention and attrition patterns and develop solutions that address both system-wide issues and individual school needs. Whereas in 2019 and 2021, the State Board submitted the Statewide Educational Data Warehouse Amendment Act to the Council of the District of Columbia for consideration. Whereas the bill would require the Office of the State Superintendent of Education to publicly and annually report data relevant to understanding teacher retention and attrition in the district. Whereas over the past several years, OSSE has improved its data collection and public sharing of teacher data, especially with its 2022 Educator Workforce Report, which shared data on all educators across each of the DC's 70 local education agencies in the 2021-22 school year, as well as school leader and paraprofessional data and insights into DC's educator preparation provider pipeline. Whereas OSSE's 2022 Educator Workforce Report is a step in the right direction, and OSSE has shared an overview of its plan for future teacher data releases with the State Board. Whereas while there has been progress in the quality and amount of data shared by OSSE, there are major differences between OSSE's current and planned data releases and the State Board's proposed legislation. Whereas to further analyze these differences, the State Board's Teacher Practice and School Support Committee invited Mary Levy, an education finance lawyer, and from whom the State Board commissioned its reports on teacher turnover in 2018, 2019, and 2021 to make recommendations on how to strengthen OSSE's teacher data collection and reporting. Whereas Ms. Levy made the following recommendations for the types of data that OSSE should plan to collect and share. Bullet 1, data elements in the proposed statewide Educational Data Warehouse Amendment Act that are not currently included in OSSE's metrics, such as type of educator credential, educator state of residence, the number of teachers who left their employment to teach in other states, and more. Bullet 2, mid-year educator departure rates. Whereas Ms. Levy recommended that the existing educator data set should add ward, enrollment by English language learner, special education, students designated at risk, and grades served. Whereas Ms. Levy also made recommendations for further disaggregation of OSSE's collected data, most notably that the data available should be able to be disaggregated by ward, sector, LEA, and individual school for the following topics. Bullet 1, educator experience, certification, and in-field teaching. Bullet 2, unfilled positions with associated descriptors. Bullet 3, school leader data to distinguish school principals from other school leadership roles. And whereas Ms. Levy recommended that in general, data collection should not place undue burden on teachers and principals, and that data collection of all kinds needs to be better integrated with consistent definitions and formats to eliminate duplicate requests from multiple entities. Now therefore be it resolved that the DC State Board of Education calls on the Council of the District of Columbia to adopt the statewide Educational Data Warehouse Amendment Act of 2021 to ensure that data relevant to understanding the nature of teacher retention across the district's public schools are available annually and publicly. And be it finally resolved that the State Board recommends that OSSE consider the aforementioned recommendations submitted by Ms. Mary Levy.
Thank you, Mr. Zhu. I'm going to turn now to our student representatives for a statement from the SAC on this resolution.
In response to SR 22-9, recommendations on strengthening teacher retention and workforce data, which addresses the need for different data about teacher retention to be made publicly and annually available. The Student Advisory Committee is in unanimous support of the passing of this resolution.
Thank you, Representative Jones-Burgess. Members, is there discussion on this resolution? Dr. Gasoy?
Thank you. Just very quickly, I wanted to thank Representative Wattenberg and former Vice President Batchelor for introducing this, our first legislation to the council, and I want to thank the Teacher Practice Committee for pursuing this report with Mary Levy. I think this appendix in particular is super helpful to see what is available in the OSSE report and what is still missing or partial. So just wanted to give a shout out where it's due.
Thank you, Dr. Gasoy. Representative Wattenberg?
Yeah, likewise, a shout out to the committee and to Dr. O'Leary, who has led it. It's just a good example of sort of work continuing and getting stronger and stronger. One particular point in here that I want to call out, which just goes to sort of getting deeper and deeper into this, is I don't believe the first round of our work on this ever talked about the mid-year departures, which became much more part of the record and part of the public understanding after the high school graduation scandal blew up. So I really appreciate that it's in here. It's really information that we need. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative Wattenberg. Is there further discussion? Dr. O'Leary?
The data of who's in the building and who's not in the building is available after the first or second week of school. And it's impossible to get that information. And we need to know. I mean, we have one of the highest teacher attrition rates in the country. And there are a lot of things that could be done to make that not happen, but they're not being done at all. And it's very important that we find out this information and that people act on the information and not just put it in a drawer someplace and wait for the next survey or whatever. Because it's got to be a viable document that's working all the time. Because teachers don't want to leave their profession if they're given alternatives to stay.
Thank you, Dr. O'Leary. Seeing no further discussion, the motion is on adoption of SR 22-9. Mr. Zhu, would you please call the roll?
Representative Bernstad?
Aye.
Representative Jones-Burgess? Representative Wages? Representative Washington?
Aye.
Representative Gasoy?
Aye.
Representative Chang?
Aye.
Representative Wattenberg?
Aye.
Representative O'Leary?
Aye.
Representative Parker?
Aye.
Representative Reed?
Aye.
Representative Patterson?
Aye.
Representative Thompson? And Representative Sutter?
Aye.
The motion passes.
Thank you. Our third resolution is SR 22-10 on the timely settlement of the WTU contract. Representative Gasoy, would you like to make the motion?
So moved.
A motion has been made by Representative Gasoy. Is there a second? I'll second. The resolution being properly moved and seconded, Mr. Zhu will read the resolution into the record.
State Board of Education resolution on the timely settlement of the Washington Teachers Union contract, SR 22-10. Whereas the District of Columbia has one of the highest teacher attrition rates in the country, Whereas in addition to broader retention challenges, school districts across the country continue to experience a shortage of teachers, especially in specific subject areas. Whereas according to data from the Office of the State Superintendent of Education, public schools in DC have also experienced staffing challenges, with SY 21-22 teacher vacancies being highest in subject areas such as elementary education, English language arts, and special education. Whereas since 2018, the State Board has had a continued commitment to improving teacher retention. Whereas the State Board will continue to advocate for school-wide conditions that support student learning, such as ensuring teachers have a fair living wage and adequate planning time, and ensuring schools are well-resourced. Whereas research shows that teaching longevity is positively associated with student achievement gains throughout a teacher's career, and that a teacher's effectiveness increases at a greater rate when they teach in a supportive and collegial work environment. Whereas the Washington Teachers Union represents over 4,500 current and retired teachers, whereas District of Columbia Public School teachers have gone without a contract for 3 years, leaving them without a salary raise adjusted for inflation or unexpected costs during the pandemic. Whereas members of the WTU testified before the State Board during our September 21st public meeting, explaining the consequences of not having a renewed contract, whereas the details of the current negotiation are not publicly available or known. Whereas the State Board has heard testimony from W2 members that an updated contract is needed to provide clear guidelines for addressing pandemic-related issues, including technology use, student mental health, family engagement, and more. Whereas improved working conditions for teachers are essential to creating a positive learning environment for students. Whereas a contract that ensures teachers receive benefits and pay commensurate with the cost of living in the District of Columbia will contribute to teacher retention and stability for students citywide. And whereas a contract that ensures teachers have adequate time to thoughtfully plan is essential to student learning. Now therefore be it resolved that the DC State Board of Education urges a prompt resolution be negotiated between the Washington Teachers Union and DC Public Schools based on the values of centering students, improving teachers' working conditions, and supporting teacher retention.
Thank you, Mr. Zhu. I'm going to turn to our SAC for any statement they have on the resolution.
In response to SR 22-10 on the timely settlement of the WTU contract, which addresses the need for a fair, equitable, and timely settlement of the WTU contract, the Student Advisory Committee is in unanimous support of and raises no concerns relating to the passage of this resolution or its amendments.
Thank you very much, Representative Bernstad. I'm going to turn now to Dr. Gasoy. I know there was language shared with members earlier this week that would replace the final clause here. And in discussion with the Educator Practice Committee, it was agreed upon to accept that as a friendly amendment without substantive changes. So I just want to let Representative Gasoy let us know what the language should read so that we have it on the record. I'm going to buy you some time here. And then we'll go ahead and make that change as non-substantive and change the resolution in its final version, which will be publicly posted. I may be able to find it if it is helpful.
I am pretty sure this is the language that was shared.
So I offer I put forward a friendly amendment that the final clause of this resolution read as following. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the DC State Board of Education strongly urges, no, sorry.
Do you want me to?
There were many versions.
Yeah.
I'm so
Do you want me
sorry.
to read the one that I have that I think is right and you can affirm? Now therefore be it resolved that the DC State Board of Education urges a prompt resolution to negotiations between the Washington Teachers Union, WTU, and the DC Public Schools, DCPS, in order to improve teachers' working conditions, maintain existing labor protections, and support teacher retention, thereby enhancing students' educational experiences.
Yes, with one addition, which is increasing, raising salaries.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much, Representative Gasoy. Members, is there discussion on the resolution? Dr. O'Leary.
For over 2 years, teachers have been praised by all of the elected officials and their appointees for their diligence, for their professionalism, for their passion, and for their steadfastness during the pandemic, and for a contract not to be approved immediately by those education leaders is a travesty.
Thank you, Dr. O'Leary. Dr. Gasoy.
Thank you. First, I just want to thank all the teachers who have been working nonstop through the pandemic without a contract. Thank you for staying and for doing all that you do. We should not be here. We should not have to pass this resolution. But I do want to say that it is, as it should go without saying, it's unacceptable to have to go 3 years without a contract under any circumstances, but especially through a pandemic. It's an astounding amount of time without basic workplace protections and salary increases to keep up with the cost of living. And it also should go without saying that drawing out of negotiation process puts a strain on our teachers already stretched so thin. But as outlined in this resolution, denying teachers basic protections also undermines student learning and the morale of school communities as a whole. And while we don't know the details behind the holdup in negotiations that have finally led to arbitration on the WTU contract, the union communicates directly with its 4,500 members, and the WTU negotiation teams know what teachers need to be properly compensated. It is therefore hard for me to imagine that it is in the union's interest to keep negotiations going for 3 years unless the terms being offered by the mayor's team are unacceptable. It is also hard to imagine that the WTU would favor moving to arbitration, which now denies its members a vote on the new contract. Therefore, I am going to venture to address Mayor Bowser directly, and I'm speaking for myself as a rep, not for the state board, when I say that it is shameful to nickel and dime our teachers, if that's what's happening, who have worked nonstop, as I mentioned, under the most stressful circumstances, and who are the absolute backbone of our education system under any circumstances. I had hoped to urge the mayor to make this situation right by bringing the negotiation process to a swift and fair settlement. Now I can only hope that the arbitration will ensure that a fair and generous contract to our teachers is accomplished. So,
Dr. Patterson?
Thank you, and I appreciate everybody putting this resolution forward. As a parent who have 2 children in DCPS school, 2 middle schoolers, I truly just appreciate what teachers have gone through over the last few years. And to be able to come back and still educate children at the way they're educating children is phenomenal. And for any administration or any body to not want to deal with them fairly and give teachers their proper due and appreciation through a fair contract is unconscionable, in my opinion, as a parent, and who see these teachers every day show up day after day under all the stress that they have gone through, all that they're dealing with. I think we just can do better as a city in how we respond to our teachers at a crisis in time like this when we're talking about a contract. It's 3 years now. In the midst of that, we went through a pandemic. They showed up. They were there for our kids. Whether that was online, whatever the case may be, they were there. And as a parent who also is a parent of an educator, although not a DCPS educator, I understand what that looked like day in and day out, because I watched my daughter online and I've watched her every day since she's come back to school. It is time for our city to give our teachers what they are due. 100%. So I support this. I look forward to supporting it and voting for it.
Thank you, Dr. Patterson. Representative Wattenberg.
Yeah, I just want to co-sign everything that Dr. Patterson and Dr. Gassoy just said in terms of the importance of it and the importance of the mayor directly taking responsibility for putting forward a contract that can be accepted. Thank you.
Representative Bernstad.
Basically, ditto what Ruth Wattenberg just said. It should not be difficult for public employees to communicate with the person or the team in charge of their contracts. If this was almost any other profession, it would be shocking to hear that they went 3 years without a contract and were unable to negotiate despite their best efforts and calls. We've heard from many different teachers that are members of the WTU. I'm thinking of Laura Fuchs, who described the state of schools. And ultimately, in their negotiations, we should be listening to them because they're the ones in the classroom. We mentioned, I think in almost every single ceremonial resolution passed today about how important teachers are in preventing things like bullying and harassment. Teachers are often our first line of support for students in many different aspects, whether that be regarding their IEPs, bullying, domestic violence, and we cannot expect them to be able to address this sufficiently under unfair labor conditions. So, yes, I'm in support of this resolution.
Seeing no further discussion, motion is on adoption of SR 22-10. Mr. Zhu will call the roll.
Representative Bernstad.
Aye.
Representative Jones-Burgess. Representative Wages. Representative Washington.
Aye.
Representative Gassoy.
Aye.
Representative Chang.
Aye.
Representative Wattenberg.
Aye.
Representative O'Leary.
Aye.
Representative Parker.
Aye.
Representative Reed.
Aye.
Representative Patterson.
Emphatically aye.
Representative Thompson. And Representative Sutter.
Aye.
The motion passes.
Thank you. Our final resolution is SR 22-11 on the submission of letter to DC Education Research Collaborative. Representative Wattenberg, would you like to make the motion?
Yes, let me say this. There have been a lot of hiccups getting this resolution to our board. Without going into detail on that, I want to say that originally it was a proposal to recommend that the research consortium prioritize the implementation of the new council legislation on preventing reading disabilities. Then there was going to be a letter on that. The letter was sent. Then it was going to be a resolution with the letter. And as we were hiccuping, it became clear that our president had a concern with passing the letter as a resolution. And in the spirit of unity and getting everybody on board on sort of a strong resolution on behalf of strong reading policies, the Standards Committee yesterday discussed a different approach to this. And so that's what we're going to do. So I'm not going to submit this tonight. And it apparently didn't have an equity statement as well. But we're not going to submit it tonight, but the committee will be working on something, and hopefully all of you will see it either in November, hopefully, and if not, November and December.
Thank you, Representative Wattenberg. So we're going to pull Resolution SR 22-11. Are there any objections? Okay, seeing none, I'll simply note for the members of the public that if you'd like to see the letter that was submitted to the Research Practice Partnership on behalf of the board, you can find it on our website under Our Work, where you find our resolutions. There's also a section of our publications, and our letter is published there. So I do encourage members of the public to go onto the State Board's website to search for the letter and to see what the State Board agreed to unanimously sign and submit to the Research Practice Partnership. Members, that concludes the resolution portion of our evening, so we're now into new business and announcements. Are there any items of new business or announcements? Dr. Reed.
Yes, I just want to, the concern about the resolutions, letters, I encourage the board, maybe it might be helpful for these actions that we just take a blanket vote of, should the board move a resolution on a certain topic? Should the board do a letter on a certain topic and vote yay or nay? We can negotiate what's inside of those letters or resolutions, but I think it's helpful sometimes to at least get it on a documentation or to document that the board wishes to move on something. Because sometimes I notice that certain things switch around on the backside. So it's helpful to kind of at least surface that the board has an interest in writing a resolution, writing a letter, so that at least we know we're on the same page about that. And then we can work towards whatever the content of that letter or that resolution may be. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Dr. Reed, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Where would you have us take a vote on an intent to move something in the future? Because at the moment, our bylaws only allow us to vote here.
Okay, so I would recommend whenever members propose that they want to, because I know that there have been from the dais letters that have been proposed. I know from the dais, or maybe during the working session, that there was information like you wanted to move a resolution. I know a while back I was like, oh, let's write something related to a letter for, what was that? Something about council. Anyway, but I think just like how you do Robert's Rules of Order, you can just vote on, is this something that the board is interested in following up either through letter or resolution, and we can take a vote and have it, at least archived, that we are deciding to take that action, and then we can negotiate the content of whatever that might be. So at least we're leaving some meeting with clarity of what action we're going to take, as it sometimes varies once we leave meetings.
Members, are there any other questions for Dr. Reed on this proposal? Dr. Gasoy?
I think this is an area just in general where maybe it would be good to put something in writing to clarify what our process is. I was also thinking about, the in-person attendance at the SAC to present our resolutions and equity statements. It was a lot more feasible I'll just speak for myself, when it was virtual. And I completely forgot that it wasn't going to be virtual. So I was like, why don't you just, tell me when I need to be on and I'll get on. And then I realized it's just not possible. And so I don't think that we in that case, allow logistics to get in the way of the content that's important, right, that we want to pass. But it's something in general, it seems like there's a lot of gray, and we would benefit from, first of all, settling on what the process is, what needs to happen, what happens if it doesn't happen, so that we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, right, when maybe somebody missed a step, and there's more clarity. So I guess what I'm saying is let's maybe put this on the agenda for the next working session.
Thanks for that suggestion. Other questions, comments? Dr. O'Leary? Is what we do in the business meeting. We discuss what is going to be on future agendas. What I'm hearing Dr. Reed say is that she thinks we need to have a more formal means of capturing what the board has an intention of doing in the future. And I'm reflecting back, so please tell me if I'm mishearing it, that because it sounds like there have been things that we've discussed doing that have fallen through the cracks. I further heard from Dr. Gasoy that there's a concern that we might need to codify processes and make those processes feasible. It felt more feasible to Dr. Gasoy for adults to present at the SAC when those meetings were virtual. It feels less feasible for Dr. Gasoy now to do that, and she's questioning whether logistics have gotten in the way. So it sounds like these are further items for discussion at a business meeting, and I can certainly talk with Vice President Thompson about whether we have space on the November working session meeting to put these items on. Representative Bernstad.
Yeah, I want to note something, just briefly, that I've noted the past two new businesses at the last working session and the last public meeting, is that I think that the codification of these processes is going to be difficult because the Student Advisory Committee is not a committee within the bylaws. So I strongly think that that's something we need to do first. I know there's going to be changes to bylaws regarding committees in January, but I do hope that we can achieve this before then, because I think that we can't move on with, like, how do we present to the SAC if the SAC doesn't have a set of standards or guidelines by which we exist. I've reached out to Interim Executive Director Ju, because I don't know how to write a resolution. So I've sent very recently, so it would definitely not be ready for this public meeting, obviously, some recommended updates to 5.1 and 5.8 of the bylaws that set the standards for what the Student Advisory Committee is, so that way, I'm rambling, but basically, I think this is important that we do this. It cannot happen absent the SAC existing in the bylaws, because we can't require something of a committee that is not required to exist. And then I would also like to note, and just say it, we forgot to tell everyone that the SAC was back in person. And since I am the returning student representative, and I was the one who went through that shift of online to in-person, I will totally take the, that is on me, because I did not mention it to anyone. And unfortunately, because of technology, our projector is yellow for some reason. Everything on the screen is yellow. So we do not have the capacity to zoom anybody in. So yeah, I just like to note that at this time we cannot have people joining us in a virtual capacity. Maybe we can figure something else out in the future. Owl, I don't know, speaker attached to my computer. So we'll work on figuring that out for the next SAC meeting, because I do recognize that we meet at 5 p.m. on a Monday.
Yep. Thank you, Representative Bernstad. I'll just add voice to two things. One, I think it's important that even as we have all these discussions, that we remember that our board is working pretty hard at the moment on a lot of fronts. And so we all deserve to give you grace for not remembering to communicate that. And I think we all deserve to extend grace to one another for processes that are not yet codified. I think it's also important that we contemplate how much the board can do over the next 2 months before a new set of board members join the board and are sworn in, while we're also working to onboard a new executive director, which is really consuming a lot more time than perhaps even I'll say for myself, Vice President Thompson, and the staff have adequately shared with members, that the amount of time that has taken is truly significant. So I appreciate these suggestions. I will discuss them with Vice President Thompson to figure out where we calendar them, but I also want to be mindful of our reduced staff at the moment, how hard they are all working, and what is feasible for our board to manage in this time frame. Representative Wattenberg, are you waiting? And then I'll come back to you, Dr. Reed.
Yes, so what I was going to say is that I wouldn't make any comments, substantive comments now, because we'll talk about it at the next working meeting, or are you saying we're not sure we're going to talk about it at the next working meeting?
I don't want to make an agenda on the working meeting without speaking to my leadership colleague, Vice President Thompson, who's not with us.
Okay.
So I'm not going to commit to anything tonight.
Okay, so I'll just say that I would have some additional comments as well on this, but I won't do them now since it's late. And I also want to just really be grateful to the staff for all the efforts that they're doing, because I know it's a lot going on. So thank you very, very much.
Dr. Reed?
I was just going to say, if capacity is an issue, maybe we should consider the number of ceremonial resolutions that we're doing so that we can make way for substantive things. I really have a hard time, and I appreciate the things that we are recognizing, but if we can't get to the core of our work, we got to figure out what can we alleviate, because I would hate for people to come for public testimony and we can't do something because we have other things in place that are nice, but not the core of what we do.
Second that.
Is there further new business? Representative Bernstad.
Oh my gosh. Okay, the thing keeps falling off the microphone. I hope this isn't too bad audio. Yeah, I just want to second that I appreciate the work of the staff. I was just highlighting what I had sent just so people know where we are, and I was hoping that it makes sense as logical steps, but also, like I said, I'm not really sure. I've only read 5.1 and 5.8 of the bylaws because that's all that pertains to me as a student representative. So if there's anything that I'm missing, that's where it is. I just wanted to share how I was thinking and what steps made sense, next steps made sense for me logically.
Thank you, Representative Bernstad. Any additional items of new business or announcements? Seeing no further new business or announcements, I want to thank all of our members and our audience for their time and engagement tonight. As a reminder to the viewing public, our State Board will continue to hold meetings in person. We will next convene at our November 2nd working session and November 16th public meeting. With no further business before the Board, I will entertain Dr. O'Leary's motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Dr. Patterson seconds. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. This meeting of the Public District of Columbia State Board of Education is adjourned at 9:01 p.m.